husband stood up at our 10th anniversary dinner, clinking his glass. Not to toast our love, but to announce to the entire table of elites that I was terrible in bed. The laughter from his family was deafening, especially from his brother's wife, who covered her mouth in mock shock while her eyes danced with malice. I sat there freezing in my beige dress, wishing the floor of the five-star restaurant would open up and swallow me whole. But then a deep voice from the shadows of the VIP booth behind us cut through the laughter, saying, "Actually, you are wrong, young man. She is absolutely amazing." You should have seen the color drain from my husband's face when he realized who had spoken. Before I tell you how I destroyed his ego, his career, and his bank account in a single night, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the person who was supposed to protect you. I am Serena Williams, and at 32 years old, I had perfected the art of being invisible. To the high society of Atlanta, I was just Jamal's wife, the quiet woman in the background, the mother who organized the nannies, the accessory that looked good in family photos but never had anything interesting to say. Tonight was supposed to be different. It was a humid Georgia evening, and the air conditioning inside the Obsidian was humming against the oppressive heat outside. This restaurant was the kind of place where you had to know someone just to get on the waiting list. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen tears, and the waitstaff moved with the silence of ghosts. We were seated at the center table, the one reserved for people who wanted to be seen. Jamal had insisted on inviting his family. His mother sat to my right, judging my choice of appetizers. His younger brother Marcus sat across from us, looking bored while checking his crypto portfolio on his phone. And then there was Tiffany, Marcus's wife, my sister-in-law. She was a petite blonde woman with a sharp smile and eyes that constantly scanned the room for someone more important to talk to. She had spent the last 3 years making little digs at me, microaggressions wrapped in compliments. Tonight she was wearing a red dress that was cut low enough to make the waiter blush, while I was wearing the high-necked beige silk dress Jamal had picked out for me. He always said he liked me modest. He said it made him look like the star. I sipped my water, watching Jamal laugh loudly at his own joke. He was already 3 glasses deep into a bottle of Cabernet that cost more than my first car. He was handsome in that way that made people trust him with their money. He was an investment banker on the rise, a man who sold confidence for a living. And tonight, he was high on his own supply. He tapped his fork against his wine glass, the sharp ringing sound cutting through the ambient jazz music. The table fell silent. Heads turned from nearby tables. This was Atlanta, and people here loved a spectacle. "I would like to make a toast," Jamal announced, his voice booming a little too loudly. He swayed slightly on his feet, one hand resting heavily on my shoulder. His grip was tight, almost painful. "To 10 years of marriage, 10 years of building an empire." Everyone raised their glasses, murmuring congratulations. I forced a smile, hoping he would just say something nice and sit down. I just wanted to go home and take off the uncomfortable heels he insisted I wear. But Jamal did not sit down. He looked down at me, a smirk playing on his lips. "You know, folks, people always ask me how I do it, how I manage billions of dollars in assets, stay in shape, and keep a happy home. And I tell them it is all about balance. I bring the fire, and Serena here, well, she brings the water." He chuckled, and the table chuckled with him. But I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I knew that tone. It was the tone he used when he wanted to make someone feel small so he could feel big. "She is the perfect mother to our kids," Jamal continued, gesturing with his wine glass, sending a few red droplets onto the pristine white tablecloth. "And she keeps the house spotless. But let us be honest, family. She is safe. She is reliable. Like a minivan. You do not buy a minivan for the thrill of the ride, do you?" The laughter was louder this time, nervous but distinct. My mother-in-law let out a short bark of a laugh before covering her mouth. I stared at my plate, my face burning. He was comparing me to a car. A boring utility vehicle. "Oh, Jamal, stop it." Tiffany chimed in, her voice high and sing-song. You are terrible. Serena is not a minivan. She leaned across the table, her eyes locking onto mine with predatory glee. She is just traditional. There is nothing wrong with being a little vanilla. Some men like vanilla. Not men like Jamal, obviously, but some men. She winked at Marcus, who snickered into his napkin. That was the dynamic. Jamal would light the match and Tiffany would pour gasoline on it, while pretending to put it out. I gripped the linen napkin in my lap so hard my knuckles turned white. Please stop, I whispered. Just sit down, Jamal. He did not hear me. Or maybe he did, and that is why he kept going. He looked around the room, soaking up the attention. He loved an audience. Vanilla is putting it kindly, Tiffany, Jamal said, slurring slightly. Let us just say that if excitement was a currency, my wife would be bankrupt. We have been married 10 years, and honestly, folks, sometimes I feel like I am sleeping next to a log. I have to check for a pulse. The table erupted. This time it was not nervous laughter. It was raucous. Marcus was slapping the table. Tiffany was wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. Even the waiter looked away, embarrassed for me. Jamal was laughing the hardest of all, looking down at me with a mixture of pity and disdain. He felt powerful, humiliating me. He felt like the alpha male, the king of the castle, who was burdened with a boring wife, but was magnanimous enough to keep her around. I felt tears pricking the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I would not give them the satisfaction. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I thought about the files locked in my safe at home. I thought about the bank accounts he did not know existed. I thought about the fact that I had been silently fixing his messes for a decade. But Jamal was not done. He leaned in close, his breath heavy with wine, and whispered loud enough for the table to hear. But hey, at least she does not spend much money, right? You do not need expensive lingerie when you do not have any passion to use it for. That was it. The air left my lungs. I prepared to stand up to leave, to run away, as I always did. But before I could move, a chair scraped against the floor at the table directly behind us. A heavy privacy screen had obscured the occupants of that booth, but now a man stepped out. He was tall, with graying hair, and an impeccably tailored suit that cost more than everything Jamal was wearing combined. He held a cane, but he did not lean on it. He held it like a weapon. The laughter died instantly. Silence swept through our corner of the restaurant like a cold wind. It was Mr. Sterling, the media mogul, the billionaire, the man Jamal had been trying to get a meeting with for 6 months, the man whose investment could make or break Jamal's career. Jamal's mouth fell open. He looked like a child caught stealing candy. Mr. Sterling, he stammered, trying to straighten his tie. I did not know you were dining here tonight. What an honor. Mr. Sterling did not look at Jamal. He did not look at Tiffany, who was frantically trying to adjust her cleavage to be more prominent. He looked directly at me. His eyes were dark and serious, filled with a respect that confused everyone at the table. I apologize for interrupting your dinner, Mr. Sterling said, his voice a low rumble that commanded absolute attention. But I could not help but overhear your speech, young man. And I felt compelled to correct the record. Jamal blinked, confused. Correct the record, sir? Yes, Mr. Sterling said. He took a step closer to our table, ignoring Jamal's extended hand. You described your wife as boring, as passionless, as terrible. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. You are mistaken. I have known Serena for quite some time now, and I can assure you she is amazing. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the ice melting in the water glasses. Tiffany's jaw dropped. Marcus looked from Sterling to me, his eyes wide. My mother-in-law looked like she had swallowed a lemon. But it was Jamal's reaction that was the most terrifying. First came the shock, then the confusion, and then the rage. I saw it rise in his eyes like a tide. His narcissism could not process what was happening. He could not imagine that Mr. Sterling knew me professionally. He could not imagine that I had value. So his mind went to the only place a small man's mind can go. You know her, Jamal whispered, his voice trembling. You know my wife. He looked at me, his face twisting into an ugly mask of jealousy. Amazing. He said she is amazing. How would you know that? Mr. Sterling smiled a cold, thin smile. That is between Serena and myself, but you should learn to value what you have before you lose it. Jamal turned on me. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh. You are sleeping with him. That is it, isn't it? That is why you have been disappearing in the afternoons. That is why you have extra cash. You are banging the old man for money. The accusation was so loud that the entire restaurant stopped eating. I looked at Jamal. I looked at the sweat beading on his forehead, the vein throbbing in his neck. I looked at Tiffany, who was watching with a gleeful expression, waiting for my destruction. And something inside me snapped. Not a break, but a release. The shackles of 10 years of submission fell away. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not try to explain that I was Mr. Sterling's crisis management consultant, that I had saved his company from a hostile takeover last year, that the amazing thing he referred to was my brain, not my body. Jamal did not deserve the truth. Not yet. Instead, I picked up my glass of wine. It was a 2015 Bordeaux, full-bodied and deep red. I looked Jamal in the eye. You are pathetic, Jamal, I said. My voice was calm, steady, loud enough to be heard, but quiet enough to be terrifying. Before he could respond, I threw the wine. It was a perfect arc. The dark red liquid splashed across his white designer shirt, soaking into the fabric, dripping down his chin, staining his expensive silk tie. He gasped, sputtering, backing away, and knocking his chair over with a loud crash. You crazy witch! He screamed, wiping wine from his eyes. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my beige dress. I picked up my clutch. Happy anniversary, Jamal, I said. I hope the laundry bill is worth the laugh. I turned to Mr. Sterling. He gave me a barely perceptible nod, a salute from one power player to another. I walked out of the restaurant, my head held high, the sound of Jamal's cursing fading behind me. I did not look back. I walked straight past the valet, pulled out my phone and summoned an Uber. As I stood on the curb, the humid night air wrapping around me, I knew one thing for certain. The wife he knew was gone. The minivan was gone. The architect had just arrived, and by the time I was done with him, he would wish he had never learned my name. The silence in the Mercedes on the ride home was heavy enough to crush a lesser woman. Jamal drove with a white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle feathering beneath his skin. He did not look at me. He stared straight ahead, driving too fast, weaving through the Atlanta traffic with an aggression that mirrored his bruised ego. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the passing streetlights, letting the city blur into streaks of gold and red. I did not speak. I knew the explosion was coming, and I needed to conserve my energy for the fallout. When we pulled into the driveway of our estate, the tires crunched loudly on the gravel. Jamal killed the engine and stormed out of the car, slamming his door with a violence that shook the frame. I followed him more slowly, smoothing the silk of my beige dress. The house loomed above us, a sprawling monument to his vanity. Or so he thought. He had no idea who really signed the checks that built this place. I walked through the front door, and the moment the latch clicked shut behind me, Jamal spun around. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He did not look like the polished investment banker the world admired. He looked like a petulant child who had been told no for the first time. You think you are funny? He spat, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged foyer. You think humiliating me in front of Sterling was a smart move? Do you have any idea how much money was on that table, Serena? Do you have any concept of what I do to keep you in this lifestyle? I stood by the staircase, clutching my purse. I did not humiliate you, Jamal, I said calmly. You did that yourself. You insulted me. Mr. Sterling simply corrected you. He laughed a harsh barking sound that lacked any humor. Corrected me. He was mocking me. And you helped him. You threw wine on me, Serena. On a $3,000 shirt. You looked like an insane person. You called me terrible in bed in front of your mother and your brother. I countered, my voice remaining steady. You compared me to a minivan. Did you expect me to thank you? I expected you to know your place. He roared, stepping into my personal space. He towered over me, using his height to intimidate. But I did not flinch. I had faced down boardroom sharks and hostile takeovers. A drunk husband with a fragile ego was nothing compared to that. My place is clearly not here, I said, turning to walk up the stairs. I am going to sleep in the guest room tonight. You are not going anywhere. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was hard, bruising. I pulled my arm back and he let go, but the threat hung in the air. You want to act like a child throwing tantrums? Fine. I will treat you like one. He held out his hand, palm up. Give me the keys. I frowned. What keys? The Mercedes, he said, his eyes cold and hard. You do not appreciate the things I give you. You think you can just drive around in a $100,000 car that I pay for after disrespecting me? Give them to me. I looked at him for a long moment. He wanted to strip me of my mobility. He wanted to trap me here. I reached into my purse and pulled out the key fob. I dropped it into his hand. It felt heavy with symbolism. And the credit cards he added, closing his fingers around the keys. The Amex, the Visa, all of them. Jamal. That is ridiculous, I said, feigning shock. How am I supposed to buy groceries? How am I supposed to run the house? You will figure it out, he sneered. Maybe you can use that amazing charm Sterling was talking about. Or maybe you can learn some respect. Until you apologize and admit you were wrong, your access is cut off. I am freezing the joint accounts tonight. He was trying to suffocate me. He wanted me to panic, to beg, to fall to my knees and plead for his forgiveness so he could feel like a king again. I watched him pull out his phone and tap the screen, logging into the banking app right in front of me. Done, he said, showing me the screen. Status frozen. You have $0, Serena. 0. You are nothing without me. Remember that. I looked at the screen. I let my lower lip tremble just slightly. I let my shoulders slump. I gave him the reaction he craved. Jamal. Please, I whispered. This is too far. It is exactly what you deserve, he said, turning his back on me. He walked toward his study, the bottle of scotch in his hand. Do not bother coming into the master bedroom. I do not want to look at you. I waited until he slammed the study door. Then I straightened my spine. I walked up the stairs, not to the guest room, but to the master bedroom. I packed a small bag, not because I was leaving, but because I needed him to think I was broken. I lay in the bed that night, listening to him stumble upstairs hours later, smelling the liquor seeping through the cracks of the door. He slept in the guest room. I slept in the king bed alone. And for the first time in 10 years, I slept soundly. The next morning, the isolation began. Jamal left for work before I woke up, taking both sets of car keys. The garage was empty save for my gardening tools. I opened the fridge. It was fully stocked, but the symbolism was clear. I was a prisoner in a gilded cage. I needed to go to the pharmacy. I opened my ride-sharing app. I linked it to my secret personal account, the one Jamal didn't know about. I called a basic sedan. When the driver pulled up to the gate of our estate, he looked confused. The security guard, a man I had hired and paid bonuses to every Christmas, waved him through without a question. I sat in the back of the Toyota Corolla, watching my neighbors drive by in their Rovers and Porsches. They waved. I waved back. They probably thought my car was in the shop. They had no idea my husband was trying to starve me into submission. I returned home an hour later. And as I walked up the driveway, a familiar white convertible pulled in. It was Tiffany, my sister-in-law. She hopped out of the car looking fresh and vibrant in a tennis skirt and designer top. She held a basket of muffins like she was Little Red Riding Hood coming to visit Grandma. "Serena!" She called out, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Oh my God, look at you. Using a rideshare. Is the Mercedes in the shop?" I stopped on the porch. "Jamal took the keys," I said simply. Tiffany's eyes widened, but the smile didn't leave her face. "Oh no, he must be really upset. I told Marcus that Jamal seemed really stressed last night. You know how he gets when he feels disrespected." She walked up the steps, brushing past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. She set the muffins on the kitchen island and leaned against the marble counter, claiming the space as her own. "I just came by to check on you," she said. "I know it must be hard. Jamal is a powerful man, Serena. He has needs. Complex needs." I poured myself a glass of water, ignoring the muffins. "What are you trying to say, Tiffany?" She sighed, picking at her perfectly manicured nails. "Look, I am just saying, as a woman to a woman, maybe you should give him some space. He has been spending a lot of time at his investment property lately. You know, the apartment downtown." I froze. Jamal had mentioned buying a small unit for out-of-town clients, but he always claimed it was rented out. He goes there to think. Tiffany continued, watching me closely for a reaction. "To decompress. He says it is the only place he can get some peace. Maybe if you made this house more peaceful, he wouldn't need to go there." She was blaming me. She was telling me my husband had a bachelor pad and it was my fault. But there was something else in her tone, a gloating quality. She knew too much about that apartment. She knew too much about his schedule. "I see," I said, keeping my face neutral. "Thank you for the muffins, Tiffany. But I have a headache. I need to lie down." She pouted. "Aw, poor thing. Well, you rest up. And maybe think about an apology letter. Jamal loves handwritten notes. It might help him forgive you." She bounced out of the house, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and toxicity in her wake. I watched her car disappear down the driveway. I waited until the gate closed, then I locked the front door. I did not lie down. I went to the basement. Jamal thought the basement was just storage, old furniture, holiday decorations, boxes of clothes we never wore. He never came down here. It was dusty and dark. But behind a stack of old paintings wrapped in brown paper, there was a door. It looked like a utility closet. It was locked with a biometric scanner I had installed 5 years ago when I first realized Jamal was hiding money. I placed my thumb on the pad. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside, the air was cool and filtered. A bank of monitors hummed on the wall. This was my nerve center. The place where the architect worked. I sat in the ergonomic chair and woke the screens. I had cameras everywhere, not just in this house, but in the properties I owned through shell companies. And interestingly enough, the apartment building downtown where Jamal's investment unit was located was owned by one of my subsidiaries. I had access to the building's security feed. I typed in the address Tiffany had hinted at. The penthouse unit. Of course he would take the penthouse. I pulled up the internal cameras. I had installed them for tenant security, or so the lease said. Jamal never read leases. The screen flickered to life. The apartment was modern, stark, cold. White leather furniture, abstract art. It looked like a showroom, not a home. I scrubbed through the footage from yesterday afternoon. I saw Jamal enter. He was pacing, talking on the phone, probably complaining about me to Marcus. Then the door opened again. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a client. It wasn't a business associate. It was a woman. She was young, petite, with dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. She was wearing a professional skirt suit, but she looked disheveled. I zoomed in. I recognized her instantly. It was Chloe, Tiffany's personal assistant, the girl who organized Tiffany's charity galas, who picked up her dry cleaning, who walked her dogs. The girl Tiffany treated like a slave, but praised to the heavens in public. I watched as Jamal walked over to her. He didn't hug her like a lover. He grabbed her face and kissed her hard, possessively. She dropped her bag and wrapped her arms around his neck. They moved to the couch. I felt a wave of nausea, but I forced myself to keep watching. I needed to know the extent of it. Then the door opened a third time. And this was the moment that turned my blood to ice. Tiffany walked in. She didn't knock. She had a key. She walked into the apartment while her brother-in-law was on the couch with her assistant. She didn't scream. She didn't look shocked. She laughed. She walked over to the wet bar and poured herself a drink while Jamal sat up buttoning his shirt. Chloe looked embarrassed, smoothing her skirt, but Tiffany just waved a hand at her. "Relax, honey," Tiffany said, her voice captured clearly by the high-definition audio. "We are all family here." Jamal took the drink from Tiffany. "Did you tell her?" he asked. "I went to see her this morning," Tiffany said, sipping her own drink. "I told her you needed space." She looked pathetic, Jamal, standing there in her old clothes drinking tap water. "She has no clue." "She is useless," Jamal grumbled. "I need to get her out of the house. I need that prenup enforced." "Don't worry," Tiffany said, sitting on the arm of the sofa next to him. "We will break her. Give it a week of no money and no car. She will sign anything you want just to get a grocery allowance. And then—" She looked at Chloe and smiled a wicked conspiratorial smile. "Then we can finally have some fun without the nanny watching." I sat back in my chair in the basement. The glow of the monitors illuminated the tears drying on my cheeks. It wasn't just an affair. It was a game. A sick, twisted game they were playing with my life. Tiffany wasn't just an enabler. She was the architect of my misery. She was providing the venue, the girl, the alibi. They thought I was the nanny. They thought I was the pathetic wife who would crumble without a credit card. I reached for the phone on the desk. The secure line. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Sterling picked up on the first ring. "It is worse than we thought," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Tell me," Sterling said. "He is sleeping with his sister-in-law's assistant, and the sister-in-law is running the operation." There was a pause on the line, then a low, dangerous chuckle. "They have made a grave error," Sterling said. "What do you need?" "I need the merger documents," I said. "The ones he thinks he is signing next week. I have them here. I want to make some changes. Add a clause, a morality clause, and I want to change the name of the acquiring entity." To what Sterling asked. "To Phoenix Holdings," I said. "That is your shell company, isn't it?" "Yes, I am going to buy him, Sterling. I am going to buy his debt, his company, and his future. And when he stands on that stage next week thinking he is the king of the world, I am going to show him who really owns the crown." "Do it," Sterling said. "I will stall him until the gala." I hung up the phone. I looked at the screen one last time, at the three of them laughing in that apartment, laughing at me. "Enjoy it," I whispered. "Enjoy the champagne. Because it is the last drink you will ever taste that doesn't taste like ash." I turned off the monitors. I locked the secure room. I went back upstairs to the silent, empty kitchen. I took out a chicken from the freezer to thaw for dinner. I would cook. I would clean. I would play the part for a few more days. But inside, the minivan was gone. The architect was building a scaffold, and they were all stepping right onto the trapdoor. The chicken sat on the granite counter, slowly losing its chill in the room temperature air, but I would not be there to cook it. I stood in the center of the kitchen, listening to the silence of the house. For 10 years, I had filled this silence with the sounds of service. The chopping of vegetables, the folding of laundry, the quiet hum of a woman making herself smaller so a man could feel big. I turned my back on the kitchen. I walked up the stairs past the master bedroom where the sheets still smelled of betrayal, and down the hall to the guest suite. Jamal thought this room was for visiting relatives. He thought the closet contained extra linens and winter coats. He was wrong. I pressed my hand against the back wall of the closet between two stacks of Egyptian cotton towels. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a keypad. I punched in a code I had memorized a lifetime ago. The wall receded, revealing a space that was smaller than my office in the basement, but far more significant. This was the armory. Hanging on the racks were not beige cardigans or sensible slacks. There were rows of tailored power suits in charcoal midnight blue and sharp black. Tom Ford, Alexander McQueen, Givenchy. The fabrics were armor designed to deflect weakness and project absolute authority. On the shelves sat stilettos that could pierce concrete and handbags that cost more than Tiffany's car. I stripped off the beige dress Jamal had chosen. It fell to the floor in a heap, a shed skin of a life I was done living. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. The bruises on my ego were invisible, but I could see the fire returning to my eyes. The dullness Jamal loved, the flatness he called peace, was gone. I pulled on a black silk blouse and a pair of wide-legged trousers that fit like a second skin. I slipped into a blazer with shoulders sharp enough to cut glass. I pulled the pins from my hair, shaking it out before twisting it into a severe, intricate knot at the nape of my neck. I applied a coat of matte red lipstick, the shade of a warning sign. I was no longer Serena the wife. I was Serena the architect. I grabbed a phone from the safe. It was a satellite phone, untraceable and encrypted. As I walked out of the closet, it rang. I answered it without looking at the screen. Parlez-moi. I said, my voice dropping an octave into fluent French. Talk to me. The voice on the other end was frantic. It was the personal assistant to a Saudi diplomat currently in Paris. There is a situation, madame. The photos. They are going to leak in an hour. I walked down the stairs, my heels clicking a rhythm of war on the hardwood. Listen to me, Jean-Luc. You will call the editor of Le Monde. You will tell him that if those photos run, we will release the dossier on his father's offshore accounts. Do you understand? But madam, the assistant stammered, he will be furious. He will be compliant. I cut him off, switching back to English effortlessly. Fear is a better motivator than fury. Make the call, and transfer the consultation fee. The rate has doubled for the inconvenience. I hung up. Crisis averted. $1 million earned in 30 seconds. Jamal thought I didn't know the value of $1. He thought I needed his allowance to buy tampons. If he only knew that I generated more revenue before breakfast than his firm did in a quarter, he would have a heart attack. I bypassed the garage. I couldn't take the Mercedes. He had the keys and I didn't want him to know I was mobile. I walked out the back door, crossing the manicured lawn to the service road that ran behind the estate. A black sedan was waiting, its engine idling quietly. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like oil spills. The driver stepped out and opened the door. Good evening, Ms. Williams. Good evening, Arthur. Take me to the hangar. We drove in silence. I watched the city of Atlanta pass by. It was a city of secrets. Old money. New money. Dirty money. I knew where all the bodies were buried because I had dug half the graves myself, figuratively speaking. For 5 years I had operated in the shadows, fixing the problems of the elite, erasing their mistakes, crafting their public images. They called me the architect because I built narratives and demolished enemies. Jamal was a small fish in this ocean. He was a guppy who thought he was a shark because he bought a nice suit. He didn't know the waters he was swimming in. He didn't know that the currents were controlled by me. We arrived at the private airfield 30 minutes later. The car drove directly onto the tarmac, stopping beside a Gulfstream jet that gleamed under the floodlights. I wasn't flying anywhere. The jet was just a meeting place, a secure, soundproof room where billionaires could speak freely. I walked up the stairs. Inside the cabin smelled of expensive leather and aged scotch. Mr. Sterling was sitting in one of the armchairs reading a file. He looked up as I entered, his eyes crinkling in a smile. Now that is the woman I know, Sterling said, closing the file. No more beige, I see. Beige is for people who want to blend in, I said, taking the seat opposite him. I am done blending in. Sterling poured 2 glasses of scotch neat. He slid one across the table to me. I took a sip, letting the burn settle my nerves. So, he said, leaning back. Jamal. What about him? I asked, swirling the amber liquid. He called my office 5 times today, Sterling said. He is desperate, Serena. He thinks this merger with my media group is his golden ticket. He thinks if he lands this deal, he will make partner. He will be the king of Atlanta finance. I laughed a dry, humorless sound. He thinks a lot of things. He thinks he owns the house he lives in. He thinks his mistress is a secret. He thinks I am stupid. Sterling shook his head. I have seen the proposal he sent. It is amateur work. The numbers are inflated, the projections are optimistic to the point of delusion. If it were anyone else, I would have shredded it and had security throw him out of the building. But you didn't, I said. No, Sterling said. I kept the meetings. I took his calls. Because I saw your maiden name on the emergency contact forms in his HR file 3 years ago, I did my research. I realized who he was married to. You knew, I asked, surprised. The architect is a legend, Sterling said. You saved my brother's Senate campaign from that scandal in D.C. I recognized the style, the precision. When I realized Jamal was married to the woman who made problems disappear, I was intrigued. I wanted to see if he had any of your brilliance, and I asked. Sterling snorted. He is a hollow suit. He has no vision, no strategy. He is all ego and appetite. Honestly, Serena, I do not know how you stood it for 10 years. I looked out the window at the runway lights. I loved him, I said simply. Or I thought I did. I thought his arrogance was ambition. I thought his control was protection. I wanted a simple life. I wanted to be a wife. I wanted to turn off the brain that never stops analyzing threats. And how did that work out for you? Sterling asked gently. He humiliated me, I said, my voice hardening. He betrayed me, and he is planning to leave me destitute. Sterling nodded. So what is the play? Do I kill the deal? Do I tell him tomorrow that the merger is off? I can crush his career before lunch. I thought about it. It would be easy. A word from Sterling and Jamal would be toxic. No firm in the city would touch him. He would lose his job, his status, his income. It would be a swift, merciful execution. But mercy was not what I wanted. I wanted him to feel the fall. I wanted him to understand the height from which he was plummeting. I wanted him to believe he had won everything just before he lost it all. No, I said slowly. Do not kill the deal. Sterling raised an eyebrow. You want me to fund him? I want you to encourage him, I said, leaning forward, my eyes locking with Sterling's. I want you to tell him the merger is on. I want you to make him believe he is the smartest man in the room. Give him hope. Give him the contract. But Serena, Sterling warned, if I sign that contract, he gets a $20 million payout. He becomes powerful. He only gets the payout if he stays the CEO for 30 days after the signing, I said. Put a morality clause in the contract. A strict one. Any reputational damage, any scandal, any proof of financial impropriety, and the deal is void. He gets nothing, and he becomes liable for the breach. Sterling smiled a slow, dangerous smile. You have something on him. I have everything on him, I said. I have the affair. I have the embezzlement from his current firm. I have the tax evasion. I have enough to put him away for 10 years. Then why wait? Sterling asked. Why let him sign? Because I said, standing up and walking to the door of the jet. If you kill the deal now, he is just a failure. He can blame the market. He can blame you. But if he signs the deal, if he stands on that stage at the gala next week and thinks he has touched the sun and then I take it away, that destroys him. It destroys his name. It destroys his soul. I turned back to Sterling. Let him climb, Mr. Sterling. Let him climb to the very top of the mountain. Let him see the view. Let him taste the air up there. I paused my hand on the latch of the door. That way he will have a long time to scream on the way down. Sterling lifted his glass in a toast. To the climb, he said. To the fall, I replied. I walked down the stairs of the jet into the cool night air. The black car was waiting. I got in and checked my phone. There was a notification from the security system at the house. Jamal had just come home. I watched the live feed on my phone. He was stumbling through the front door drunk and angry. He kicked over a vase of flowers I had arranged yesterday. He screamed my name. "Serena," he yelled. "Where are you? You better be hiding." I watched him search the house. He checked the guest room. Empty. He checked the master bedroom. Empty. He went to the kitchen and threw a plate against the wall, shattering it. He looked pathetic. He looked small. He pulled out his phone and dialed my number. I watched it ring on my screen. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message. I listened to it as the car merged onto the highway. "You are playing games, Serena." His voice slurred. "You think you can hide from me. I am going to ruin you. I am seeing the lawyers tomorrow. I am taking the house. I am taking everything. You will be on the street by the end of the week." I closed the app. I leaned my head back against the leather seat. "Go ahead, Jamal," I whispered to the empty car. "See the lawyers, draft the papers, build your little castle of cards. I am the architect, and I have already condemned the foundation." The conference room in Buckhead smelled of lemon polish and arrogance. Jamal sat at the head of the mahogany table, his legs stretched out, his expensive loafers crossed at the ankles. Next to him sat his lawyer, a man named Harrison, who wore a suit that was too shiny and a smile that was too wide. They looked like two sharks circling a wounded seal. I was the seal, or at least that is the role I was playing today. Harrison slid a thick stack of documents across the table. The sound of the paper hitting the wood echoed in the silent room. "These are the divorce filings," Harrison said, his voice oily and smooth, "and a copy of the prenuptial agreement you signed 10 years ago. As you can see, Mr. Williams is being quite generous considering the circumstances." I picked up the papers, my hands trembling just enough to sell the performance. I looked at Jamal. He wasn't looking at me. He was checking his watch, probably counting the minutes until he could meet Chloe at the apartment. "Generous," I whispered, my voice cracking. "You are kicking me out of my home, Jamal. You are leaving me with nothing." Jamal finally looked at me. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth I had seen in them a decade ago. "I am leaving you with exactly what you brought into this marriage, Serena," he said. "Which is nothing. The prenup is ironclad. What is mine is mine. What is yours is yours. And since you haven't worked a day in 10 years, I assume your column is empty." He was enjoying this. He was savoring the destruction of the woman who knew him when he was driving a used Honda. "I need time," I said, letting a tear slip down my cheek. "I need time to find a place. I need time to process this. Please, Jamal, give me a month." "A month," Jamal laughed. "You have a week. I want you out by next Friday. I have plans for the house. Renovations." Renovations? He meant he was moving his mistress in. He wanted to erase me. He wanted to repaint the walls I had chosen, replace the furniture I had curated, and fill the space with the cheap, tacky taste of a 22-year-old assistant. Harrison tapped the paper. "Sign the acknowledgement of receipt, Mrs. Williams. And we can wrap this up. If you contest it, we will freeze your access to the residence immediately. This is the best deal you are going to get." I picked up the pen. I hesitated. I let them see the fear in my eyes. I wanted them to feel powerful. I wanted them to feel secure. Because a secure enemy is a careless enemy. I signed. "Get out," Jamal said as soon as the pen left the paper. "I have a meeting." I stood up, clutching my purse to my chest, like a shield. I walked to the door, my head down. "Don't forget the gate code changes on Friday," he called after me. "Don't try to come back." I walked out of the building into the blinding Atlanta sun. I walked to the corner and turned right, disappearing from their view. And then I stopped. I straightened my spine. I wiped the tear from my cheek with a decisive swipe of my thumb. The trembling in my hands ceased instantly. I pulled out my burner phone and dialed. "I have the papers," I said. He took the bait. "Good," came the reply. "Meet me at the airfield. We are going to New York." 2 hours later, I was sitting in a corner office on the 45th floor of a skyscraper in Manhattan. The view of Central Park was breathtaking, but I wasn't looking at the trees. I was looking at Elias Thorne. Elias was 70 years old and cost $2,000 an hour. He didn't wear shiny suits. He wore bespoke wool that whispered wealth. He didn't smile. He won. He had handled the divorces of CEOs, senators, and foreign dignitaries. He was the nuclear option, and he was on my payroll. He adjusted his spectacles and looked down at the prenup Jamal had been so proud of. It is a standard document, Elias said, his voice dry and raspy. Very boilerplate. It protects the assets acquired by either party prior to the marriage and keeps separate any assets acquired individually during the marriage. Jamal thinks it protects his millions, I said. Elias nodded. It does. If he actually had any millions that were legally his. He opened a second file. This one was much thicker. It contained the forensic accounting I had compiled over the last 5 years. Your husband has been very busy moving money, Elias observed. Shell companies in the Caymans, crypto wallets, hidden investment accounts. He has been siphoning off his income to hide it from you. He thinks he is clever. He thinks he is a genius, I corrected. Elias turned a page. However, in his haste to hide his assets from you, he has made a critical error. He moved the money into accounts that are technically not under his name, but under the names of corporations he controls. And since he used marital funds to seed those corporations without your consent, a judge is going to look very unfavorably on that. We can freeze everything he touches. We can tie him up in litigation for a decade. I know, I said. But I don't want to just freeze his money, Elias. I want to hurt him where he lives, literally. I pulled a USB drive from my purse and slid it across the glass table. Look at the house, I said. Elias plugged the drive into his laptop. He opened the file labeled The Estate. He read for a few minutes. His eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch, which for Elias was the equivalent of a scream. This is interesting, he murmured. Tell me, I said, leaning forward. Jamal believes he purchased the estate in Buckhead 5 years ago, Elias said. He pays a mortgage every month. The payments go to a holding company called Obsidian Properties, LLC. Yes, I said. He thinks Obsidian Properties is a blind trust managed by his bank. He set it up to hide the house from creditors because he was leveraging himself too thin on other deals. Elias looked at me over the rim of his glasses. But he didn't set up Obsidian Properties, did he? No, I said, a cold smile spreading across my face. I did. Elias tapped a key, bringing up the incorporation documents. Obsidian Properties LLC was incorporated in Delaware 6 years ago. The sole shareholder is... He paused, and a rare glint of amusement appeared in his gray eyes. The sole shareholder is the Matilda Grant Trust. My grandmother, I said. She passed away 7 years ago. Elias noted, checking his notes. She did, I said. And she left everything to me. But I kept the trust active. I used her inheritance to fund Obsidian Properties. When Jamal wanted to buy the house, I told him I knew a private equity firm that would finance him at a great rate if he put the title in their name for asset protection. He was so greedy for the low interest rate and the privacy that he signed everything without looking at the fine print. Elias chuckled. It was a dry, dusty sound, like parchment cracking. So Jamal does not own the house, Elias said. No, I said. And the bank he thinks he is paying the mortgage to is actually just an account you control. Correct, I said. Which means Elias concluded, closing the laptop, that Jamal is not a homeowner. He is a tenant. And I am the landlord, I finished. Elias leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. And according to the lease agreement he signed, unknowingly, thinking it was a loan document, the landlord reserves the right to terminate the tenancy immediately upon evidence of illegal activity or... He squinted at the screen. Immoral conduct occurring on the premises. I have video of him bringing his mistress into the house, I said. I have video of drug use in the living room. Then he is in breach of lease, Elias said. You can evict him. I don't just want to evict him, I said. I want to destroy the illusion. He thinks he is kicking me out next Friday. He told me the gate code changes. Elias nodded slowly. We can file an emergency eviction notice tomorrow, but if you want maximum impact. I want him to feel safe, I said. I want him to bring his mistress there. I want him to think he has won. And then I want the sheriff to knock on the door. Elias pulled a fresh sheet of paper from his drawer. He picked up a fountain pen. Very well, Mrs. Williams. We will prepare the writ of possession. But there is one more thing. What is it? Since he has been paying rent to a company you own for 5 years, and that money has essentially been going back into your own pocket. Technically, he has been living in your house for free while you invested his rent payments. I smiled. The architect always wins twice, Elias. Elias signed the paper with a flourish. Indeed. I stood up and walked to the window looking down at the city of New York. Far below, people were rushing like ants, unaware of the giants walking among them. Jamal was an ant. He thought he was building a hill, but he was standing under a magnifying glass, and I was holding the sun. He wanted a week. He wanted me out by Friday. I would give him his week. I would let him pack my boxes. I would let him invite Tiffany over to measure the drapes. I would let him sleep in the master bed with his assistant thinking he was the master of the manor. And when the clock struck midnight on Friday, he would find out that he wasn't the king of the castle. He was just a guest who had overstayed his welcome. I turned back to Elias. Send the papers to the sheriff in Atlanta, I said. Tell them to execute the order on the night of the gala. The gala, Elias asked. Yes, I said. He will be at the merger party. He will be on stage accepting his applause. I want the locks changed while he is accepting his award. I want his key to stop working the moment he steps off that podium. That is cruel, Elias noted. It is justice, I replied. He wanted to leave me with nothing. I'm just returning the favor. I left the office and headed to the airport. I had a flight to catch. I had to get back to Atlanta. I had to put on my beige dress and my sad face. I had to play the victim for a few more days. But as the plane climbed into the sky, I looked down at the clouds and felt a surge of power. The paperwork was signed. The trap was set. The house wasn't his. The money wasn't his. Even his freedom was about to be repossessed. Jamal Williams was living on borrowed time, and the rent was due. The invitation said no children, no gifts, and absolutely no Serena. But I have never been one to follow rules I did not write. The baby shower for Tiffany was held at the estate she shared with Marcus Jamal's younger brother. It was a sprawling white mansion that looked like a wedding cake left out in the sun too long. The theme was Parisian chic, which meant a lot of pink macarons, Eiffel Tower centerpieces, and women in pastel dresses, pretending they liked each other. I pulled up to the valet in a rented Porsche. Jamal still had the Mercedes keys, and he thought I was at home, crying over a bowl of instant noodles. I stepped out of the car. I was not wearing beige. I was wearing a jumpsuit of liquid gold silk that draped over my curves like molten metal. It was bold. It was loud. It was a declaration of war. The security guard at the door held up a hand. Name, please, he asked, checking his list. Serena Williams, I said, smiling. He scanned the list. I am sorry, ma'am, you are not on the list. Mrs. Tiffany was very specific. I didn't argue, I didn't beg. I simply pulled $100 bill from my clutch and folded it into his hand. Check again, I said. Under family. He looked at the bill. He looked at my car. He looked at the line of cars behind me. Go right in, ma'am, he mumbled, stepping aside. I walked into the garden where the party was in full swing. The air smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. A string quartet was murdering Debussy in the corner. Tiffany was holding court near a fountain looking like a meringue in a poofy pink dress. When she saw me, her smile dropped faster than Jamal's credit score. She excused herself from her circle of sycophants and marched over to me. Her heels sank into the grass with every angry step. What are you doing here, Serena? She hissed, keeping her voice low so the other guests wouldn't hear. I told Jamal you were not invited. You are an embarrassment. I adjusted my sunglasses. I am family Tiffany. I wouldn't miss celebrating the new arrival. Besides, I brought a gift. She looked me up and down, her eyes narrowing with jealousy. She hated that I looked good. She hated that I wasn't broken. Well, there is no room for you, she said spitefully. The family table is full. The friend table is full. She scanned the garden. Her eyes landed on a small folding table set up near the catering tent next to the portable toilets. It was where the nannies and the waitstaff were taking their breaks. You can sit there, she said, pointing a manicured finger, with the help. That is where you belong anyway, isn't it? Since you are going to be broke soon. She smirked, waiting for me to leave. Waiting for me to cry. That is perfect, I said. I prefer the company of people who actually work for a living. I walked over to the table and sat down. The nannies looked at me, confused by the woman in gold sitting next to them. I introduced myself. I poured myself a glass of iced tea. I watched Tiffany return to her throne, thinking she had won. She thought putting me in the corner made me invisible. She forgot that the corner gives you the best view of the room. I watched Marcus. Jamal's brother looked terrible. He was wearing a linen suit that hung loosely on his frame. He was sweating despite the mild weather. He kept checking his phone, wiping his forehead. I knew why. The crypto market had crashed this morning. His portfolio was bleeding red. He was leveraged to the hilt. He had borrowed money from sharks to buy Bitcoin at the peak, and now the sharks were circling. He walked over to the gift table. It was piled high with boxes wrapped in silver and pink. Tiffany loved gifts. She loved things. She loved spending money she didn't have to impress people she didn't like. I stood up. It was time to deliver my present. I walked over to the gift table when no one was looking. I didn't have a box. I had a manila envelope. It was thick. It was heavy. I slid it under a stack of diaper cakes. I left a corner sticking out, just enough to catch the eye. Then I went back to my seat and waited. 10 minutes later, Marcus wandered over to the table. He was looking for a drink, but the bar was crowded. He leaned against the gift table, sighing. He looked down. He saw the envelope. He frowned. He saw his name written on it, not in calligraphy, in bold red marker. For Marcus. Urgent. He picked it up. He looked around. He didn't see me. I was hidden behind a floral arrangement, watching like a hawk. He opened the envelope. I watched his face. First confusion. He pulled out a stack of papers. They were credit card statements, but not his. They were Tiffany's secret cards, the ones she opened in her maiden name, the ones she used to buy the Birkin bags she claimed were gifts from her mother, the ones she used to pay for the rental of the apartment Jamal was using. Then he pulled out the second document. It was a deed transfer. A transfer of equity from their home, this very house, into a private trust controlled by Tiffany's mother. She had secretly signed over the house to protect it from his debts, leaving him with nothing but the liability. And finally, the third document. A chat log. A printout of texts between Tiffany and her divorce lawyer. She was planning to leave him. She was waiting until after the baby was born to file so she could get maximum child support. She called him a loser. She called him a sinking ship. She laughed about how she was spending his last liquid assets on this party. Marcus went still. He stopped sweating. He went pale. He looked up and his eyes found Tiffany across the garden. She was laughing, holding a glass of champagne, accepting a compliment on her dress. He walked over to her. He moved like a zombie. People moved out of his way, sensing the energy radiating off him. Tiffany didn't notice him until he was standing right in front of her. "Hey babe," she said, smiling. "Are you okay? You look pale." Marcus didn't speak. He threw the papers in her face. The wind caught them. Credit card bills fluttered through the air like confetti. The deed transfer landed in the fountain. The divorce text fell into the punch bowl. "What is this?" Tiffany asked, laughing nervously. "Is this a game?" "You stole the house," Marcus said. His voice was quiet at first. A low growl. "You stole my house." Tiffany's smile faltered. "Marcus, honey, not here. We can talk later." "You spent $40,000 on handbags last month," he shouted. The music stopped. The conversation stopped. Everyone turned to look. $40,000, Tiffany, while I was begging my brother for a loan to cover the mortgage. Tiffany grabbed his arm. "Marcus, stop it. You are embarrassing me." "I am embarrassing you," he roared, shaking her off. "You are leaving me. You are planning to divorce me and take the kid. It says it right here." He grabbed a handful of papers from the grass and shoved them at the guests. "Read it," he screamed. "Read what she thinks of you all. She calls you vultures. She calls your mother an old hag." Tiffany lunged for the papers, but it was too late. Her mother-in-law picked one up. Her face went tight as she read her own description. The chaos was beautiful. It was a symphony of destruction. Marcus was screaming. Tiffany was crying, mascara running down her face. Guests were whispering, pointing, picking up the bills to see the evidence. I sat at the nanny's table and took a sip of my tea. It was sweet, deliciously sweet. Tiffany looked around the garden, searching for a scapegoat, searching for someone to blame. And then she saw me. I was the only one not looking shocked. I was the only one smiling. Her eyes locked onto mine. There was hatred there, yes. But there was also fear. For the first time she saw me. Not the beige wife. Not the minivan. She saw the woman who had walked into her house and lit a match without anyone noticing. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You!" she shrieked. "You did this! You planted these!" Marcus turned to look at me. He looked confused, but then he looked back at the papers in his hand. The evidence was real. The signatures were real. It didn't matter who delivered the message. The truth was the truth. He looked at Tiffany with disgust. "I am done," he said. "I am leaving, and I am freezing the accounts. Good luck paying for this party." He stormed out of the garden, kicking over a display of macarons on his way. Tiffany stood alone in the center of the ruin. Her friends were backing away. Her mother-in-law was glaring at her. Her perfect Parisian party was a battlefield. I stood up. I smoothed my gold jumpsuit. I walked over to her. I stopped just outside of slapping distance. "Lovely party, Tiffany," I said. The croissants were a bit dry, but the entertainment was top-notch. "You are a monster," she whispered. "No," I said, leaning in close so only she could hear. "I am a mirror. I just showed you what you look like." I turned and walked away. I walked past the shocked guests, past the ruined cake, past the security guard who wouldn't look me in the eye. I got into my Porsche. I checked my phone. There was a text from Jamal. "Where are you? The house is a mess. There is no food. Come home and clean this up." I deleted the text. I didn't go home. I drove to a spa. I booked a massage. I booked a facial. I booked the presidential suite for the night. Jamal was waiting for a maid. But the maid was busy burning down the village. And she was just getting started. It was Friday night. The deadline. Jamal had told me to be out by midnight, or he would have security throw me onto the street. He wanted his house back. He wanted his life back. He wanted to erase the last 10 years as if they were nothing more than a bad investment. I sat in the master bedroom in the wing-back chair facing the door. I was not packing. My clothes were still in the closet. My jewelry was still in the safe. I was wearing a silk robe the color of midnight and drinking a cup of chamomile tea. I checked the time on my phone. 11:45. He would be here soon. He loved a dramatic entrance. I heard the roar of the engine before I saw the headlights. It was his Aston Martin. He must have picked it up from the impound lot after I had reported it parked illegally earlier in the week. A petty move on my part, but satisfying. He wasn't alone. I walked to the window and peered through the blinds. Chloe was with him. She was wearing a white dress that looked suspiciously like something a bride would wear to a rehearsal dinner. She was clinging to his arm, looking up at the house with wide, greedy eyes. She thought she was moving into a palace. She didn't know she was walking into a foreclosure. I heard the front door crash open. Jamal didn't use his key. He kicked the door like he was storming a castle. "Serena," he bellowed, his voice echoing up the grand staircase. "Time is up. Get your trash and get out." I didn't answer. I took a sip of tea. I heard them coming up the stairs. Chloe was giggling. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, baby," she said. "It is so big. I can't wait to redecorate. That beige carpet has to go." "Everything goes," Jamal said. "We are burning it all down." They burst into the bedroom. Jamal stopped short when he saw me. He looked confused, then furious. "Why are you still here?" he demanded. "I told you to leave." I set my teacup on the saucer with a delicate clink. "I live here, Jamal." "Not anymore," he said, stepping into the room. He looked manic. His tie was loose, his eyes were bloodshot. He looked like a man who had been running on adrenaline and scotch for a week. "This is my house. My name is on the deed. And I am evicting you." I stood up and tightened the belt of my robe. "Actually, Jamal, that is not entirely accurate. You might want to check your paperwork." He laughed. It was a jagged, broken sound. "I know what I signed. I signed a mortgage. I paid it every month. This is my property. And you are trespassing." He turned to Chloe. "Go downstairs. Call the police. Tell them we have an intruder who refuses to leave." Chloe hesitated, looking between us. "But Jamal," she said. "She lives here." "Do it," Jamal roared. Chloe scrambled out of the room, fumbling for her phone. Jamal turned back to me. He started grabbing my things. He went to the vanity and swept my perfume bottles onto the floor. They shattered, filling the room with the scent of jasmine and broken glass. He went to the closet and started pulling my dresses off the hangers, throwing them into a pile in the center of the room. "You want to play games?" he shouted. "Fine, I will help you pack." He was destroying everything. He was tearing apart the sanctuary I had built. But I didn't stop him. I let him rage. I let him expend his energy. Because I knew who was coming up the driveway. I had seen the lights reflecting off the ceiling. Blue, red, blue, red. Silent at first, then the sirens cut through the night air. Jamal stopped mid-throw, holding one of my blazers. He smiled a cruel, twisted smile. "Hear that," he said. "That is the sound of you losing. I told you I would call them. Now you get to leave in handcuffs." He dropped the blazer and walked to the window, looking down. "Yes," he said. "3 cruisers. They sent the cavalry for you, Serena." He ran out of the room and down the stairs. I followed him slowly, calmly. I walked to the landing of the grand staircase and looked down into the foyer. Jamal had thrown the front door open. 3 officers were standing on the porch. But they weren't regular patrol officers. They were sheriff's deputies, the ones who served court orders. Officer Jamal said, spreading his arms wide. "Thank you for coming so quickly. This woman," he pointed up at me, "refuses to vacate my property. We are divorced. She has no right to be here. I want her removed immediately." The lead deputy, a tall man with a thick mustache and eyes that had seen everything, didn't look up at me. He looked at Jamal. "Are you Jamal Williams?" he asked. "Yes," Jamal said, puffing out his chest. "I am the owner of this estate." The deputy pulled a folded document from his vest pocket. It wasn't a notepad. It was a thick sheaf of legal papers stamped with the seal of the Fulton County Superior Court. "Mr. Williams," the deputy said, his voice flat and professional. "We are not here for her. We are here for you." Jamal blinked. "What?" "I have a writ of possession issued by the court this afternoon," the deputy said. He handed the papers to Jamal. "You are being evicted." Jamal took the papers, but he didn't look at them. He stared at the deputy like the man was speaking a foreign language. "Evicted," he repeated. "That is impossible. I own this house. I pay the mortgage." The deputy shook his head. "According to the title search and the lease agreement filed with the court, this property is owned by Obsidian Properties LLC. You are listed as a tenant. And according to the landlord, you are in breach of contract for illegal activities on the premises and failure to pay rent." "Failure to pay rent?" Jamal sputtered. "I pay every month. It comes out of my account automatically." "The landlord has terminated the lease." The deputy continued, ignoring him. "You were given notice via your attorney 3 days ago. You failed to vacate. Now we are here to assist you." Jamal looked at the papers in his hands. He flipped through them frantically. He saw the company name, Obsidian Properties. He saw the signature at the bottom of the lease termination. It wasn't a bank officer. It was a digital signature, the architect. He looked up at me standing at the top of the stairs. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His knees actually buckled. "Obsidian," he whispered. "You. It was you." I smiled. It was the same cold smile I had worn at the restaurant. "You should have read the fine print, Jamal," I said softly, my voice carrying effortlessly in the silent foyer. "You thought you were getting a private loan. You were signing a lease. You never owned this house. You were just a guest. And you were a terrible guest." Chloe, who had been hiding in the kitchen, came out. She looked at Jamal, then at the deputies, then at me. "You don't own the house," she asked, her voice shrill. "You told me this was yours. You told me we were kicking her out." "Shut up, Chloe," Jamal snapped. He turned back to the deputy. "This is a mistake. This is fraud. She tricked me." "That is a matter for civil court, sir," the deputy said, stepping forward. "Right now my orders are to clear the property. You have 5 minutes to collect your personal essentials. Everything else stays until the landlord arranges for a mover's inspection." 5 minutes, Jamal screamed. "My life is in here. My suits. My watches." 5 minutes, the deputy repeated, reaching for his belt. "Or we remove you with nothing but the clothes on your back." Jamal looked around the foyer. He looked at the crystal chandelier he loved to brag about. He looked at the marble floors. He looked at the life he thought he had conquered. "No," he said. "No. I am not leaving. This is my house. I paid for it. I built this life." He lunged toward the stairs. He was coming for me. His eyes were wild. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to silence the truth standing on the balcony. "Sir, stop," the deputy shouted. Jamal didn't stop. He took 2 steps up the stairs. The deputies moved fast. 2 of them grabbed him from behind. They slammed him against the wall. The sound of his head hitting the plaster was sickeningly loud. "Get off me!" Jamal screamed, thrashing against them. "Do you know who I am? I am Jamal Williams. I am a partner. I am a millionaire." "You are under arrest," the deputy said, wrestling Jamal's arms behind his back. "For what?" Jamal howled. "For living in my own house. For resisting a court order and assaulting an officer," the deputy said, clicking the handcuffs into place. They dragged him toward the door. He was kicking and screaming, cursing my name, cursing the police, cursing God. His expensive loafers scraped against the floor, leaving black scuff marks on the white marble. Chloe stood by the kitchen door, trembling. One of the deputies looked at her. "You too, miss." "Out." "But I didn't do anything," she cried. "I just got here." "Out," the deputy said, pointing to the door. Chloe ran. She didn't look at Jamal. She didn't look at me. She ran out the door and down the driveway, leaving him alone in his humiliation. They dragged Jamal out onto the front porch. The neighbors had come out. Mrs. Higgins from next door was watching from her lawn in her bathrobe. The security guard I employed was standing by the gate, holding it open for the police. Jamal saw them. He saw the audience. "This is a mistake," he yelled to the neighborhood. "She stole it from me. She is a witch. She is a thief." The deputy pushed his head down and shoved him into the back of the cruiser. The door slammed shut, cutting off his screams. I walked out onto the balcony that overlooked the driveway. The night air was cool. I wrapped my silk robe tighter around me. I watched the blue lights spin, reflecting off the fountain in the front yard. I watched the car pull away, taking my husband, taking my problem, taking the noise. The deputy looked up at me. He touched the brim of his hat. "Property is secured, ma'am," he said. "We will post the notice on the door." Thank you, officer, I said. I will have the locks changed in the morning. He nodded and got into his car. The convoy drove away, leaving silence in its wake. I looked down at the empty driveway. The Aston Martin was still there, parked crookedly. I would have it towed tomorrow. I walked back inside. The house was quiet. The broken perfume bottles still lay on the bedroom floor. The clothes were still in a pile. But the energy was different. The heaviness was gone. I went downstairs to the kitchen. I turned on the kettle. I waited for the water to boil. I didn't feel happy. Happiness was too light a word. I felt heavy with the weight of justice. It was a dense, solid feeling like gold bars. He had wanted to humiliate me. He had wanted to throw me out on the street to make room for his ego. Instead, he was sitting in a holding cell, probably asking to see a lawyer who wouldn't pick up the phone because I had already put him on retainer an hour ago. I poured the water over a fresh tea bag. I walked back out to the balcony with my cup. I looked at the city lights in the distance. The phone in my pocket buzzed. It was a text from Sterling, "Is it done?" I took a sip of tea. It was warm and soothing. I typed back, "The tenant has been evicted. The renovation can begin." I put the phone down. I took a deep breath of the night air. It smelled of rain and jasmine and victory. I was alone in the big, empty house. And for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't just occupying space. I owned it. The house was silent, but my phone was screaming. It vibrated on the marble island in the kitchen, buzzing with a ferocity that threatened to crack the screen. I did not touch it. I stood there in the pre-dawn light, watching the notifications stack up like a pile of dead leaves. Jamal was out on bail. I knew this because my lawyer Elias had called me at 4 in the morning to tell me. Marcus had put up his house, the one he was already losing, to cover the bond. It was a foolish move, a desperate move, but desperation runs in that family like a genetic defect. I expected Jamal to come back to the house. I expected him to scream at the gate, to throw rocks at the windows. I had security standing by. I had the sheriff on speed dial. But Jamal did not come back. He did something far more dangerous. He went to the court of public opinion. I picked up my phone and unlocked it. My social media feeds were a war zone. I opened Instagram. There was a live video saved on Jamal's profile. It had been posted 2 hours ago. It already had 50,000 views. I pressed play. Jamal was sitting on a beige sofa. The background was unfamiliar, but it looked cheap. Maybe a motel. Maybe a friend's basement. He looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed. His designer shirt was wrinkled and unbuttoned at the collar. He had cultivated a 5 o'clock shadow that made him look rugged and broken. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He looked directly into the camera. He took a shaky breath. "Hey, everyone," he said, his voice cracking perfectly. "I know you have all heard the rumors. I know you saw the police cars at my house last night. I wanted you to hear the truth from me before the lies destroy everything I have built." He wiped a tear from his eye. A single perfect tear. "Last night my wife Serena had me arrested. She had me thrown out of the home I paid for. The home I built for us." He paused, letting the sympathy build in the comment section. I saw the hearts flying up the screen. I saw the angry emojis. "For 10 years I gave that woman everything," Jamal continued. "I worked 80-hour weeks. I bought her cars. I bought her jewelry. I stood by her when we struggled to conceive. I stood by her when she fell into depression and stopped working. I carried us." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. He was using our fertility struggles. He was weaponizing our pain to paint himself as a saint. "And how does she repay me?" Jamal asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She cheated on me, not just with anyone. She has been having an affair with a billionaire, an old man with deep pockets." He didn't name Sterling. He was smart enough to avoid a defamation lawsuit from a media mogul. But everyone in Atlanta knew who he meant. They had seen us leaving the restaurant together. They had seen Sterling defend me. "She manipulated the paperwork," Jamal said, leaning into the camera. "While I was working, she was moving assets. She tricked me into signing over the deed to the house to one of her lover's shell companies. She stole my home right out from under me, and when I confronted her, she called the police and said I was trespassing. He buried his face in his hands. The camera shook slightly, as if the person holding it, maybe Tiffany, maybe Marcus, was crying too. "I am homeless," he sobbed. "I have nothing. She took it all. She is a gold digger of the highest order. She played the long game and she won. But I am not going to let her get away with it. I am going to fight. For my dignity, for the truth." The video ended. I scrolled down to the comments. They were vicious. "She belongs to the streets. I always knew she was shady. She was too quiet. Stay strong, King. We got you. How could she do that to a good man?" It was a landslide. Jamal had tapped into the oldest narrative in the book. The hardworking man betrayed by the ungrateful, scheming woman. He had turned the city against me in 20 minutes. My phone rang again. It was a number I recognized. My mother-in-law. I debated ignoring it. I didn't need her poison. But I answered. I needed to know the extent of the damage. "Hello, Beatrice," I said calmly. "You devil," the voice on the other end screeched. It was a sound so full of hate it crackled the speaker. "You wicked, wicked woman." "Good morning to you too, Beatrice." "Do not get smart with me," she spat. "I just saw my son. He is broken, Serena. He is sitting here in my kitchen crying because of you. How could you? He tried to throw me out of my own house." "Beatrice," I said. "He has a mistress. He was bringing her to live in my bed." "Lies," she screamed. "All lies. Jamal told me everything. He told me how you seduced that old man. He told me how you forged the papers. You are a thief. You are a whore." I held the phone away from my ear. Her voice was shrill, hysterical. "I welcomed you into this family," she continued. "I treated you like a daughter even though you were dry and barren. I overlooked your faults. And this is how you thank us. You steal his house." "I never stole anything," I said, my voice ice cold. "And your son is not the victim. He is a liar and a cheat." "You will burn for this," she hissed. "The whole city knows what you are now. You will never show your face in Atlanta again. We will run you out of town. You are finished, Serena. Do you hear me? Finished." I hung up. I blocked the number. I walked to the window and looked out at the driveway. A news van was parking across the street. A reporter was setting up a camera, pointing it at my front door. They were circling. I turned away from the window. I walked to the kitchen and made myself a cup of coffee. My hands were steady. My heart rate was slow. Jamal thought he had won the public relations war. He thought he had shamed me into hiding. He thought that by painting me as a villain, he could pressure me into a settlement. He wanted me to panic. He wanted me to release a statement, to argue, to get down in the mud with him. But he forgot who I was. I was a crisis manager. I knew how the news cycle worked. I knew that a fire burns hottest right before it consumes itself. I didn't post a rebuttal. I didn't call the news station. I went dark. I spent the day in my office, not the basement, but the sunlit study on the main floor. I watched the narrative evolve. Blogs picked up the story, then the local news, then the national gossip sites. Investment banker homeless after wife steals estate. It was a juicy headline. My email inbox filled with hate mail. My LinkedIn profile was bombarded with negative reviews. Friends, people I had known for years, blocked me on social media. The country club sent an email suspending my membership pending an investigation into my conduct. I let it all happen. I collected every screenshot. I archived every video. I saved every threatening voicemail. Jamal was digging a hole. He was putting his lies on record. He was claiming he owned the house, claiming he paid the mortgage, claiming he was faithful. Every word was a nail in his coffin because I had the receipts. I had the bank transfers showing the rent payments to my shell company. I had the video of him with Chloe. I had the forensic accounting of his embezzlement. But I wouldn't release them on Instagram. That was amateur hour. I would release them where it mattered. Night fell. The news van left. The house was quiet again. I sat in the living room surrounded by the shadows. I felt a strange sense of peace. The worst had happened. I had been exposed, humiliated, and vilified, and I was still standing. I thought about the beige dress lying on the floor of the guest room closet. The woman who wore that dress would have crumbled. She would have called Jamal and begged him to stop. She would have signed the house over just to make the noise go away. But I wasn't her anymore. The phone rang. It wasn't a blocked number. It was Sterling. I picked it up. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling." "Serena," he said. His voice was calm, reassuring. "I assume you have seen the internet." "I have," I said. "It is quite a show." "He is very convincing," Sterling said. "He has a future in acting if finance does not work out." "Which it won't." "Are you worried?" I asked. "About your reputation? Being linked to a gold digger?" Sterling laughed. It was a rich, warm sound. "My reputation has survived worse than the ramblings of a desperate adulterer. Besides, I know the truth. And tomorrow night everyone else will too. Tomorrow night." The gala. The gala was the biggest event of the season. The merger was the centerpiece. Jamal was supposed to be the star. He had confirmed his attendance an hour ago on social media, posting a picture of his tuxedo with the caption, "Rising from the ashes." "You can't keep a good man down." "He is still coming?" Sterling asked. "He wouldn't miss it," I said. "He thinks he has won. He thinks I am hiding in shame. He thinks the morality clause won't apply because he has spun the narrative that I am the immoral one. He believes his own lie, Sterling. He thinks he is the hero of this story. And you?" Sterling asked. "Are you ready? It is going to be brutal, Serena. You are going to walk into a room full of people who think you are a monster. They will whisper. They will stare." "Let them stare," I said. "I want them to see. I want them to see what happens when you push a woman too far." "Do you have the dress?" Sterling asked. "I do," I said, looking at the garment bag hanging on the door of the study. "Is it beige?" he teased. I smiled in the darkness. "No, it is not beige," good Sterling said. "I will see you at 7. Do not be late." "I won't." "Rest well, Serena. You have a big day tomorrow." I hung up. I wasn't going to rest. I had work to do. I walked to the garment bag and unzipped it. The fabric shimmered in the moonlight. It was black, but not a morning black. It was a midnight black, sleek and dangerous. It was a dress made for a villain. If they wanted a villain, I would give them one. I would play the role. I would walk into that gala, and I would own the scandal. I went to the safe and pulled out the flash drive, the one with the presentation. I checked the files one last time. The audio was crisp. The video was clear. The bank statements were highlighted in red. I put the drive in my clutch. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Jamal was celebrating. He was probably drinking champagne with Tiffany and Marcus, toasting to his victory. He was probably telling Chloe that they would be moving back into the house by Monday. He had no idea that he was already dead. He was just a ghost walking around waiting to realize he had passed on. I turned off the lights. I walked up the stairs. I didn't go to the guest room. I went to the master bedroom. I stripped the sheets, the ones he had defiled, and threw them in the trash. I remade the bed with fresh, crisp linens. I slept in the middle of the bed. I dreamed of falling. But in the dream I didn't hit the ground. I grew wings, and they were black as night. The ballroom of the St. Regis Atlanta smelled of white lilies and old money. It was the kind of scent that you could not buy in a bottle. It was the smell of generational wealth, of power that did not need to raise its voice. Tonight was the merger gala, the event of the decade, the unification of Sterling Media and the investment firm Jamal had bet his entire life on. Jamal walked into the room like he owned the building. He was wearing a custom tuxedo with a velvet lapel that shimmered under the crystal chandeliers. On his arm was Chloe. She was wearing a silver dress that was tight enough to be illegal and bright enough to blind a satellite. She looked out of place among the understated elegance of the Atlanta elite, but Jamal did not care. To him, she was a trophy, a shiny new toy to replace the old reliable model he had discarded. He moved through the crowd shaking hands and clapping backs. He flashed his teeth in that practiced charming smile that had fooled me for 10 years. I watched him from the shadows of the mezzanine. He was radiating arrogance. He believed the rumors he had started. He believed the narrative he had spun. He thought the whispers behind hands were whispers of admiration for surviving a crazy wife. He had no idea they were whispers of anticipation for the slaughter. Jamal stopped at the bar ordering champagne for himself and a vodka tonic for Chloe. He looked around the room, scanning the faces for validation. He spotted the managing partners of his firm. He spotted the city council members. He spotted the rivals he thought he had finally beaten. He puffed out his chest. Tonight was his coronation. He was convinced that in less than an hour, Mr. Sterling would call his name and hand him the keys to the kingdom. I watched as Tiffany approached him. My sister-in-law looked brittle. She was wearing a dress that was too young for her and too desperate for the occasion. Her face was tight with tension. She had lost her husband. She had lost her home. She was currently living in a guest room at her mother's house in a neighborhood she wouldn't have been caught dead in a month ago. But tonight she was trying to claw her way back. She was trying to act like nothing had changed. She walked up to a group of socialites, women she used to brunch with, women she used to gossip with. She flashed her brightest smile. "Hello, ladies," she chirped. "Isn't this event magnificent?" The women stopped talking. They turned to look at her. It was a synchronized movement like a school of fish changing direction. Mrs. Dubois, the matriarch of the group, looked Tiffany up and down. Her gaze lingered on Tiffany's handbag, which was a season old. "Hello, Tiffany," Mrs. Dubois said. Her voice was ice. "We were just discussing the guest list. We were surprised to see you here." Considering what Tiffany asked, her smile faltering. "Considering the rumors about your finances," Mrs. Dubois said. "And your divorce. It must be so hard to show your face in public when you have fallen so far." The other women tittered. It was a polite, cruel sound. Tiffany turned red. She stammered something about restructuring and walked away fast. She headed straight for the bar, straight for Jamal. She needed his reflected glory to survive. Jamal ignored her. He was too busy explaining to a state senator how he planned to revolutionize the media landscape. He didn't see the sharks circling. He only saw the water. It was time. I stepped out of the shadows. I was not wearing beige. I was not wearing the sensible heels of a supportive wife. I was wearing the dress Sterling had helped me choose. It was black. Not a dull, matte black, but a black that devoured the light. It was structured architectural, with a neckline that plunged just enough to be dangerous, and a slit that went up to my thigh. It was a dress that said, "I am not here to participate. I am here to conquer." My hair was slicked back tight and severe. My lips were painted a deep oxblood. I wore no jewelry, except for a pair of diamond drop earrings that caught the light like daggers. I began to descend the grand staircase. The sound of my heels on the marble steps was a sharp staccato rhythm. Click, click, click. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. The room went quiet in waves, starting from the bottom of the stairs and rippling outward. People stopped drinking. Stopped. The waiters stopped moving. They didn't recognize me at first. They saw a woman who looked like a runway model or a foreign dignitary. They saw power. And then the whispers started. "Is that Serena? It can't be. Look at her." I reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted for me. They moved aside instinctively, making a path through the center of the ballroom. I walked with my head high, my eyes fixed on the center of the room where Jamal was standing. He had his back to me. He was laughing at something Chloe had said. He didn't notice the silence until it was right on top of him. He turned around. His smile dropped. His glass tilted, spilling champagne onto the floor. He blinked once, twice. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. "Serena," he whispered. "Hello, Jamal," I said. My voice was low, smooth, and carried through the silent room like smoke. He looked me up and down. He looked at the dress. He looked at the diamonds. He looked at the way the room was looking at me. And the jealousy hit him first, followed quickly by fear. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, stepping toward me. "How did you get past security?" "I walked right through the front door," I said. "You are not invited," he said, his voice rising, getting louder as his panic set in. "This is a private event, for executives, not for—" He gestured at me, struggling to find an insult that would stick to the woman standing before him. "Not for gold diggers who steal houses." I laughed. It was a soft, genuine laugh. "Oh, Jamal, you still think this is about a house?" He grabbed my arm. His grip was rough, desperate. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to drag me out of the light. "Security!" he shouted, looking around wildly. "Security! Get this woman out of here. She is trespassing. She is harassing me." A large man in a black suit stepped forward. Jamal smiled triumphantly. "Yes, you. Remove her. Now." The security guard looked at Jamal. Then he looked at me. He nodded respectfully to me. "Good evening, Ms. "Good evening, Williams," the guard said. "Is this man bothering you?" Jamal's jaw dropped. "What?" "I am the guest of honor. She is the intruder. Do your job." The guard didn't move. He crossed his arms over his chest. "I take my orders from the owner of the venue, sir. And you are making a scene." Jamal looked like he was going to have a stroke. He released my arm as if I burned him. He backed away, pulling Chloe with him. "You slept with someone to get in here, didn't you?" Jamal spat, his face twisting into an ugly sneer. "That is your move now. You spread your legs for a ticket. You think you can come here and beg for money. You think you can embarrass me into giving you a settlement." I stepped closer to him. I was wearing heels that made me almost as tall as him. I looked him dead in the eye. "I don't need your money, Jamal. I don't need your settlement. And I definitely don't need your permission to be here." "Then why are you here?" he demanded. "To watch me win. To see what a real winner looks like." "I am here to witness history," I said. Chloe piped up, her voice shrill and annoying. "You are just jealous. Jamal is going to be the CEO. He is going to be rich. And you are going to be nothing." I looked at the girl. I felt a pang of pity for her. She was so young, so stupid. "Enjoy the champagne, Chloe," I said. "It is the last free drink you are going to get." Jamal laughed. He straightened his jacket, trying to regain his composure. He looked around the room, trying to rally his audience. "She is crazy, folks," he announced, spreading his arms. "My ex-wife. Can't let go. Obsessed with me. It is sad, really. But do not worry. Security will handle it. We are here to celebrate the future. My future." He turned his back on me. He dismissed me. He thought the interaction was over. He thought he had won the moment. The lights in the ballroom flickered. Then they went out completely. The room was plunged into darkness. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A spotlight snapped on. A single brilliant beam of white light cutting through the black. It hit the stage at the front of the room. Mr. Sterling stood there. He was standing at the podium, looking impeccable in a tuxedo. He gripped the sides of the lectern, his face serious, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling said, his voice booming through the sound system. "Thank you for joining us on this historic evening." The crowd went silent. Jamal stood in the dark just outside the ring of the spotlight. I could see his silhouette. He was adjusting his cufflinks, preparing to walk up the stairs. He was ready. He was practically vibrating with anticipation. "Tonight we mark a new chapter," Sterling continued. "The merger of Sterling Media and Williams Investment Group is complete." Jamal squeezed Chloe's hand. He took a step forward. "This merger represents the future," Sterling said, "a future built on integrity, on vision, on strategy." Jamal took another step. He was smiling. He was already rehearsing his acceptance speech in his head. When I looked for a partner to lead this new venture, Sterling said I looked for someone who understood the value of building something from nothing, someone who could see the chessboard, not just the pieces. Jamal was at the base of the stairs now. He buttoned his jacket. He looked back at me in the dark and winked, a final gesture of dominance. I looked for a leader who was not afraid to make difficult decisions, Sterling said. A leader who commands respect not through volume, but through action. Jamal put his foot on the first step. And so Sterling said, raising his hand, "It is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce the new CEO of our combined entity." Jamal began to climb. He raised his hand to wave to the crowd. The architect, Sterling, shouted, "Ms. Serena Williams!" The spotlight swung. It moved fast, a blinding arc of light. It flew past Jamal, leaving him stranded in the darkness on the stairs. It hit me. It hit. The light was hot. It was bright. It illuminated the black dress, the diamonds, the red lips. For a second, there was absolute silence. The kind of silence that happens when a bomb goes off, but the sound hasn't hit you yet. Then came the gasp. A collective intake of breath from 300 of Atlanta's most powerful people. Jamal froze. He was standing on the third step, his hand raised in a wave that now looked like a surrender. He looked back at the stage. He looked at Sterling. He looked at me, bathed in light. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. I smiled. I didn't rush. I walked toward the stage. The crowd parted again, wider this time. They weren't just curious anymore. They were terrified. They knew power when they saw it. I walked past Jamal. I was close enough to smell his fear. It smelled like sweat and cheap vodka. "Excuse me," I said softly as I brushed past him. "You are in my light." He didn't move. He couldn't move. He was paralyzed by the impossible reality unfolding in front of him. I walked up the stairs. I stood next to Sterling. He stepped back, giving me the podium, giving me the floor. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Tiffany, her mouth hanging open, her eyes wide with horror. I saw Marcus looking like he wanted to vomit. I saw Chloe realizing she had bet on the wrong horse. And I saw Jamal, a small dark figure standing on the stairs, looking up at the woman he had called terrible. The woman he had called a minivan. I leaned into the microphone. My voice filled the room, amplified, clear, undeniable. "Good evening, everyone," I said. "Thank you for coming. I hope you are all enjoying the party. Because we have a lot of work to do, and some house cleaning to take care of." I looked directly at Jamal. "Shall we begin?" The spotlight burned against my skin, but it felt like a baptism. I stood next to Mr. Sterling, looking down at the man who had vowed to love and cherish me 10 years ago. Jamal was still frozen on the stairs, his hand gripping the railing like it was the only thing keeping him from falling into the abyss. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. He looked like a man who had just watched the sun rise in the west. Sterling leaned into the microphone. His voice was steady, deep, and resonated with the authority of a man who owned half the city. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his hand gesturing toward me, "there has been a slight change in the program tonight. A correction to the narrative, if you will." The room was silent. Not a glass clinked. Not a breath was drawn. 300 pairs of eyes were locked on the stage. "We are indeed merging Sterling Media with Williams Investment Group." Sterling continued, "But when we examined the assets, when we looked at the true value of the partnership, we realized that the real capital wasn't in the bank accounts. It was in the strategy. It was in the vision." He turned to look at me, a genuine smile of respect on his face. "For the last 5 years, this woman has been my secret weapon. She has navigated crises that would have sunk lesser companies. She has restructured deals that saved thousands of jobs. In the industry, she is known only as the architect. But tonight, I am proud to introduce her by her real name." Sterling paused for effect. "Please welcome the majority shareholder and new CEO of the combined entity holding 51% of the voting stock, Ms. Serena Williams." The applause didn't come immediately. The shock was too great. The cognitive dissonance was too strong. They looked at me, the beige wife, the minivan, the background character, and they tried to reconcile that image with the woman standing in the black dress, holding the keys to the kingdom. Then one person started clapping. It was Mrs. Dubois, the socialite who had cut Tiffany earlier. Then another, and another, until the sound grew into a roar. It wasn't polite applause. It was the sound of respect. It was the sound of power recognizing power. I stepped up to the podium. I adjusted the microphone. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I looked straight at Jamal. He had started to move. He was shaking his head, mouthing the word no over and over again. He took a stumbling step up the stairs. He looked like he wanted to grab me to shake me awake from this nightmare he was living. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice amplified, filling every corner of the ballroom. "And thank you all for coming." I rested my hands on the lectern. "I know many of you are confused," I said. "You expected to see my husband up here. You expected a speech about synergy and growth and the future. And we are going to talk about the future. But first we have to clean up the past." I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small remote control. "Transparency is the cornerstone of any good business," I said. "And tonight I want to be completely transparent with our shareholders, our partners, and our friends." I pressed the button. The massive screen behind me, usually reserved for quarterly earnings charts and inspirational quotes, flickered to life. It wasn't a graph. It wasn't a logo. It was a screenshot. A text message thread. The names at the top were clear: Jamal and Tiffany. The text was blown up huge, readable from the back of the room. Jamal. "She is so stupid. She signed the prenup without even reading it. I will have her out of the house by Friday." Tiffany. "Good riddance. Once she is gone, we can finally use the main house for the parties. She is such a drag. Did you transfer the funds to the offshore account, Jamal Doan? 50,000 from the joint savings. She won't even notice. She is too busy gardening." A gasp went through the room. It was sharp and sudden. I saw Tiffany in the crowd. She had her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. People were backing away from her like she was contagious. I clicked the button again. The slide changed. This time, it was a receipt. A hotel folio from the Mandarin Oriental. The date was from last month. The room service charge was for champagne oysters and strawberries. And next to it, a photo. It was grainy, taken from a security camera, but undeniable. Jamal and Chloe entering the elevator. His hand was on her lower back, her head was on his shoulder. I looked down at Chloe. She was standing near the bar crying. She looked young and foolish and ruined. "My husband has been very busy," I said, my voice cool and detached. "He has been busy spending company funds on personal entertainment. He has been busy leveraging our assets to fund a lifestyle he cannot afford. And he has been busy disrespecting the very people in this room who supported him." Jamal was at the top of the stairs now. He looked wild. His hair was messed up. His tie was crooked. "Turn it off!" he screamed. "Turn it off, Serena. You are crazy. I didn't turn it off." I clicked the button again. This was the finale. The video. The screen went dark, then lit up with a high-definition video. It was recorded in Jamal's office. I had installed the camera in the smoke detector 6 months ago. Jamal was sitting at his desk, feet up, talking on the phone. He was holding a glass of scotch. "Yeah, Sterling is a dinosaur," he was saying, laughing. "He doesn't know what hit him. I'm going to bleed that company dry. Give me 2 years and I will strip the assets, sell the IP, and leave him holding the bag." He took a sip of scotch. "And the board? A bunch of old fools. They think I am some visionary. I just tell them what they want to hear. I will fire half the staff in the first week. Cut costs, boost the stock price, and cash out my options. It is easy money." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the ballroom was heavy. It was the silence of a judge passing a death sentence. I looked at the board members sitting at the front table. Their faces were purple with rage. I looked at the investors. They were on their phones, probably calling their lawyers to pull their funding. Jamal stood at the edge of the stage. He looked out at the sea of enemies he had created. He looked at me. "You ruined me," he whispered. "No, Jamal," I said. "I just turned on the lights. You did the rest yourself." He snapped. The last thread of his sanity broke. He let out a roar, a primal sound of fury, and lunged at me. He scrambled onto the stage, his hands reaching for my throat. He wanted to kill me. He wanted to squeeze the life out of the woman who had dared to be smarter than him. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. Before he could reach the podium, two large shadows moved from the wings. It wasn't the venue security. It was my personal protection detail. Men I had hired, men who didn't care about his title. They hit him hard. One tackled him around the waist, the other grabbed his arm. They slammed him to the floor of the stage. The microphone gave a screech of feedback as the podium shook. "Get off me!" Jamal screamed, thrashing against the floor. "I am the CEO! I am the boss!" The guards hauled him up. They held his arms behind his back, forcing him to stand. He looked like a broken doll. His tuxedo was dusty. His face was red and sweating. I leaned into the microphone. I looked him in the eye. "Jamal Williams," I said. "As the majority shareholder and CEO of Phoenix Holdings, I am making my first executive decision." I paused. I let the moment hang in the air. I let everyone savor it. "You are fired, effective immediately, for cause, for gross misconduct, and for being terrible at your job. Get him out of my sight." The guards dragged him away. They dragged him across the stage, down the stairs, and through the center aisle. The crowd parted again. But this time they weren't whispering. They were silent. They watched the fall of a man who thought he could fly on wings made of wax. Jamal didn't scream anymore. He just hung his head defeated. He knew it was over. He knew there was no coming back from this. I watched him go until the doors closed behind him. Then I turned back to the room. I smoothed my dress. I took a deep breath. Now I said, my voice calm and professional. "Shall we discuss the future?" The applause started slowly again. But this time it was different. It wasn't for the show. It wasn't for the drama. It was for the architect. And I had just finished my masterpiece. The fallout was immediate and it was brutal. By the time I stepped off the stage at the St. Regis, Jamal's career was already dead. The security team had escorted him out the back door away from the cameras, but the damage was done. The video of his meltdown was already trending on Twitter. Someone had live-streamed the entire confrontation. I spent the next hour shaking hands and accepting congratulations from the board members who had previously ignored me. They looked at me differently now. There was fear in their eyes. Good. Fear was a currency I could spend. I left the gala at midnight. I did not go back to the estate. I had already sold it. The deal had closed that afternoon while Jamal was getting his tuxedo fitted. I had sold it to a developer who planned to tear it down and build condos. I didn't want the memories. I didn't want the walls that had witnessed my humiliation. Instead, I went to my new home. A penthouse in Midtown with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. It was modern, stark, and completely mine. The next morning I woke up to a sunrise that looked like fire. I made coffee and sat by the window watching the city wake up. My phone was silent. I had changed my number. Only Sterling and Elias had the new one. But I had other ways of watching. I opened my laptop and logged into the monitoring system I had set up weeks ago. I wasn't just watching Jamal anymore. I was watching the whole family. Jamal was staying at a Motel 6 off the highway. His credit cards had been declined at the Marriott. His company card was frozen. His personal accounts were drained by the legal fees he was already accruing. I watched the security footage from the motel lobby. He was arguing with the clerk about the price of a vending machine soda. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 hours. He had tried to call his contacts. I saw the call logs. No one answered. He was toxic. He was radioactive. The investment community in Atlanta is small, and gossip travels faster than light. Everyone knew he had embezzled. Everyone knew he had lied. And everyone knew he had crossed Serena Williams. Then there was Tiffany. I switched feeds. I pulled up the security camera from Marcus's new apartment. He had moved out of their mansion the night of the baby shower. He was living in a bachelor pad downtown, trying to salvage what was left of his finances. Tiffany was at her mother's house. It was a small, run-down bungalow in a neighborhood that was euphemistically called transitional. I didn't have cameras inside, but I didn't need them. The public records told the story. Marcus had filed for divorce. He cited adultery, fraud, and embezzlement. He had a forensic accountant go through their joint finances. Tiffany had stolen over $200,000 from his business accounts to fund her lifestyle and Jamal's apartment. She was facing criminal charges. I watched a news clip from a local station. A reporter was standing in front of the courthouse. In a shocking turn of events, socialite Tiffany Williams was arraigned today on charges of grand larceny and fraud. Her husband, Marcus Williams, has filed for divorce and is seeking full custody of their unborn child. The camera cut to Tiffany walking out of the courthouse. She wasn't wearing designer clothes. She was wearing a gray tracksuit. Her hair was messy. She looked at the camera, and for a split second I saw the realization in her eyes. She knew I was watching. She knew I had won. She got into her mother's beat-up sedan and drove away. She was going back to the life she had tried so hard to escape. The life she thought she was too good for. I closed the window. 2 down, 1 to go. My intercom buzzed. "Ms. Williams," the doorman said. "There is a woman here to see you. She says she is your mother-in-law." Beatrice. I smiled. I had been expecting her. "Send her up," I said. I didn't dress up for her. I stayed in my silk pajamas. I wanted her to see that I was comfortable, that I was at peace. When Beatrice walked out of the elevator, she looked small. She was wearing her Sunday best, a floral dress and a hat, but she looked shrunken inside them. She was clutching her purse like a lifeline. She looked around the penthouse. She took in the marble floors, the modern art, the view. She looked at me. "Serena," she said, her voice trembling. "Hello, Beatrice," I said. I didn't offer her a seat. I didn't offer her tea. She took a step forward. "Serena, please, we need to talk." "About what?" I asked, sipping my coffee. "About Jamal," she said. "He is in trouble, Serena. Serious trouble. He has no money. He has no home. He called me crying. He said he doesn't know what to do." I shrugged. "He is a grown man, Beatrice. I am sure he will figure it out. Maybe he can get a job. I hear McDonald's is hiring." Beatrice flinched. "Don't be cruel. He is your husband." "Ex-husband," I corrected. "And I am not being cruel. I am being indifferent. There is a difference." She started to cry. It was a pathetic sound. "Serena, please. I know we have had our differences. I know I wasn't always the best mother-in-law. But family forgives. Family supports each other. Family." I laughed. "You called me a devil, Beatrice. You told me I was barren. You told the whole city I was a whore. Is that how family treats each other?" "I was upset," she sobbed. "I didn't mean it. I was just defending my son. And now your son is reaping what he sowed," I said. "And so are you." She looked at me, her eyes wide with desperation. "What do you mean?" I put down my coffee cup. "Did you think I didn't know, Beatrice? Did you think I didn't know about the checks Jamal was writing to you every month from our joint account? $5,000 a month. For expenses." She went pale. "That money was stolen," I said. "It was embezzled from his firm. And you accepted it. You spent it. That makes you an accessory to fraud." "No," she whispered. "No, I didn't know. Ignorance is not a defense," I said. "My lawyers have already sent the file to the district attorney. They are very interested in your expenses, Beatrice. The cruises, the new car, the renovations on your house." She fell to her knees. She actually fell to her knees on my marble floor. "Please, Serena. Please don't do this. I am an old woman. I can't go to jail." "Then you should have thought about that before you helped your son destroy my life," I said. "Get up, Beatrice. You are embarrassing yourself." She struggled to her feet. She looked at me with hatred now. Pure, unadulterated hatred. "You are evil," she hissed. You are a monster. I smiled. No, Beatrice. I am just the woman who pays the bills. And your tab is closed. Get out of my house. She turned and ran. She ran back to the elevator, her heels clacking on the floor. The doors closed and she was gone. I walked to the window. I looked down at the street. I saw her walk out of the building. She looked lost. She looked broken. I felt nothing. No pity. No remorse. Just a clean, cold sense of completion. But the game wasn't over yet. There was one piece left on the board. The king. Or rather, the jester who thought he was king. That night, a storm rolled in over Atlanta. Thunder shook the glass walls of the penthouse. Lightning lit up the sky. It was a fitting backdrop for the final act. I was sitting in the living room reading a book. It was The Art of War. A cliché, perhaps, but effective. My phone buzzed. It was a security alert. Perimeter breach. Service entrance. I frowned. The service entrance was in the alley behind the building. It was locked. It required a key card. I pulled up the camera feed on my tablet. A figure was trying to pry the door open. He was wearing a hoodie pulled low over his face. He was using a crowbar. He got the door open. He slipped inside. I watched him move through the service corridors. He knew where he was going. He was heading for the freight elevator. He got in. He pressed the button for the penthouse. I knew who it was even before he pulled the hood back. It was Jamal. He looked like a wild animal. His eyes were crazy. He was soaking wet. He was holding something in his hand. It wasn't the crowbar. It was a gun. He wasn't coming to talk. He wasn't coming to beg. He was coming to end it. I didn't panic. I didn't call 911. I had anticipated this. I had prepared for this. I put down my book. I stood up. I walked to the center of the room. The freight elevator opened directly into the kitchen. I heard the ding. I heard the doors slide open. Jamal stepped out. He saw me immediately. He raised the gun. "You," he screamed. "You ruined everything." "Hello, Jamal," I said calmly. "You are late." He walked toward me. He was shaking. The gun was shaking. "I am going to kill you," he said. "I am going to kill you, and then I am going to kill myself. And then everyone will know what you did to me." I took a step forward. "Go ahead," I said. "Shoot me." He hesitated. He hadn't expected that. He expected me to scream. He expected me to run. What he asked. "Shoot me," I repeated. "End it. But know this, Jamal. Even if you kill me, you still lose, because I have already won. The world knows who you are. The world knows you are a fraud. A failure. A tiny little man who had to steal from his wife to feel big." He lowered the gun slightly. His face crumpled. "Why?" he sobbed. "Why did you do this to me?" "Because you forgot who I was," I said. "You forgot that I was the one holding you up. And when you tried to stand on my neck, you realized you couldn't fly." He raised the gun again. His finger tightened on the trigger. "Goodbye, Serena," he whispered. "Goodbye, Jamal," I said. And then the room exploded with light, not from the gun, but from the flashbangs I had installed in the ceiling. White light blinded him. A deafening boom knocked him to his knees. He dropped the gun. He screamed, clutching his ears. The doors to the panic room I had built behind the kitchen wall flew open. 4 armed guards stepped out. They were not police. They were private military contractors. They were on him in seconds. They zip-tied his hands. They dragged him to his feet. He blinked, trying to see through the afterimage of the flash. He saw me standing there untouched, unmoved. "You set me up," he gasped. "I always set you up, Jamal," I said. "From the moment you signed that lease. From the moment you met Chloe. From the moment you walked into this building tonight." I walked over to him. I picked up the gun from the floor. I unloaded it. I threw the bullets into the trash. "Take him away," I said to the guards. "The police are waiting downstairs." They dragged him toward the elevator. He didn't fight this time. He just looked at me. His eyes were empty. The fire was gone. The ego was gone. There was nothing left but a man who had lost his soul. I watched the elevator doors close. The storm raged outside, but inside it was quiet. I walked back to my chair. I picked up my book. I found my place. The war was over. The enemy was vanquished. The architect had cleared the site. Now it was time to build something new, something that would last. I turned the page. The guards hauled Jamal off the floor, but his legs gave out beneath him. He did not fight anymore. The adrenaline that had fueled his murderous rage had evaporated, leaving behind only the hollow shell of a man who knew he was cornered. He collapsed onto the Persian rug, his knees hitting the wool with a thud that echoed in the silent penthouse. "Wait!" he gasped. "Wait, please!" "Serena." I signaled to the guards. They stepped back, but their hands hovered near their holsters. They were professionals. They knew a desperate animal when they saw one. I sat down in the wingback chair facing him. I crossed my legs. I smoothed the fabric of my silk pajamas. I looked at him not with fear, not with anger, but with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a specimen under a microscope. "Talk," I said. "You have 2 minutes before the police get upstairs." Jamal looked up at me. His face was a mess. Snot and tears mixed with the sweat on his skin. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and was terrified of the punishment. "I am sorry," he sobbed. His voice was a broken wail. "I am so sorry, Serena. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean any of it." "You didn't mean to embezzle millions," I asked calmly. "You didn't mean to keep a mistress. You didn't mean to break into my home with a gun." It was the pressure, he pleaded, moving on his knees toward me. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. The firm, the market. Everyone expected me to be a star. I had to keep up appearances. I had to be the man everyone thought I was. It was too much, Serena. I was drowning." He sniffled, wiping his nose on his shoulder because his hands were still zip-tied behind his back. "And Tiffany," he continued, his eyes wide and frantic. "She poisoned me, Serena. She was in my ear every day. She told me you were holding me back. She told me you didn't appreciate me. She introduced me to Chloe. It was her idea. She set it all up. I was weak, I admit it. I was weak, and she manipulated me." I watched him throw his own family under the bus. It was pathetic, but it was exactly what I expected. A narcissist never takes responsibility. It is always someone else's fault. The world, the pressure, the sister-in-law. "You are a grown man, Jamal," I said. "Tiffany didn't force you to sign those checks. Tiffany didn't force you to lie to my face for 2 years. I know," he cried, "I know. And I hate myself for it. But I can change. I swear to you, Serena, I can change. Just give me a chance. Please don't let them take me to jail. I can't survive in there." He looked at the luxury around him, the life he had lost. "We can fix this," he begged. "You have the money. You have the power. You can make this go away. We can start over. I will be the husband you deserve. I will sign a new prenup. I will do whatever you want. Just help me." I looked at him. I remembered the man I had married, the man who had charmed me with his ambition. I looked for a trace of him in this broken creature kneeling on my floor, but he was gone. Or maybe he had never existed. Maybe I had fallen in love with a mask. I reached for the side table. There was a single sheet of paper lying there. I had placed it there before he arrived. I knew this moment would come. I knew he would beg. I picked up the paper. "I am going to help you, Jamal," I said. Hope flared in his eyes. It was a desperate, hungry light. "You are," he breathed. "Thank you, baby. Thank you. I knew you still loved me. I knew it." I leaned forward and held the paper out to him. "This isn't a check," I said. "And it isn't a pardon." He frowned, confused. "What is it?" I unfolded the document. It was a spreadsheet. A very specific spreadsheet. It had dates, amounts, and account numbers. "This," I said, pointing to the first column, "is a record of every dollar you moved into your private crypto wallets over the last 5 years." Jamal went still. His tears stopped instantly. And this, I continued, pointing to the second column, is a record of the tax returns you filed for those same years. Notice a discrepancy. You reported an income of $400,000, but you moved over $3 million into offshore accounts. He stared at the paper. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. You see, Jamal? I said, my voice soft and lethal. I was the one who did your taxes. I was the one who managed the household finances. But you insisted on filing your business income separately. You told me your accountant was handling it. I paused, letting the silence stretch. I found your accountant, Jamal. He is a software program you bought online for $40. You cooked the books yourself. And you did a terrible job. Tax evasion, Jamal whispered. The color drained from his face, leaving him gray and ashen. Tax evasion, I confirmed. Money laundering, wire fraud. It is a federal trifecta, Jamal. And the IRS does not care about your pressure. They do not care about Tiffany. They care about their money. I dropped the paper onto the floor in front of him. It landed with a soft whisper. So here's the choice, I said, leaning back in my chair. He looked up at me. His eyes were dead. Option 1, I said. You go downstairs to the police waiting in the lobby. You confess. You tell them everything. The embezzlement. The gun. The taxes. You cut a deal. You might get 5 years in a minimum security facility if you are lucky. And option 2, he rasped. Option 2, I said. You keep lying. You fight it. And tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I courier this document along with the hard drives from your office to the FBI field office in Atlanta. I checked my watch. If the FBI gets involved, they won't just look at you. They will look at everyone you did business with. They will look at the firm. They will look at your clients. And when they find the rot, you won't get 5 years, Jamal. You will get 20. And you will serve it in a place where they don't have tennis courts. He looked at the paper. He looked at me. He looked at the door. He was doing the math. He was a numbers guy after all. He knew when a deal was bad. But he also knew when he had no leverage. Why are you giving me a choice? He asked. His voice was barely a whisper. Why not just bury me? Because I said, standing up and walking to the window. I want you to know that it wasn't the police who took you down. It wasn't the market. It wasn't bad luck. I turned to face him. It was me. I want you to remember every day that you sit in that cell, that you had a chance to be honest. You had a chance to be a man. And you chose to be a thief. He hung his head. His shoulders shook. He was crying again, but this time it wasn't for show. It was the weeping of a man who was watching his own funeral. I will confess, he choked out. I will tell them. Just please don't send it to the FBI. I looked at him. I felt a flicker of pity. It was small and cold like a dying ember. Good choice, I said. I nodded to the guards. They stepped forward and hauled him to his feet. He didn't resist. He didn't look back at me. He looked at the floor, defeated, broken. They walked him toward the elevator. The silver doors slid open. They pushed him inside. Just as the doors were starting to close, a sound cut through the storm outside. It was a siren. Not one siren. A dozen. A chorus of wails rising from the street below. Jamal's head snapped up. He looked at me through the narrowing gap of the elevator doors. His eyes widened in sudden realization. Those aren't city police, he said. Those are federal sirens. I smiled. It was the smile of the architect who had just placed the final brick. I lied, Jamal, I said softly. What he screamed, lunging forward, but the guards held him back. I sent the package to the FBI this morning, I said. They have been waiting for you to walk out of this building all night. No, he screamed. No, you promised. I promised I would help you, I said. And I did. I helped you find justice. The doors slammed shut, cutting off his scream. I stood alone in the penthouse. The thunder outside rumbled, shaking the glass. I walked to the window and looked down. The street below was a sea of flashing lights, red and blue reflecting off the wet pavement. I saw the black SUVs of the federal agents. I saw the armored truck. The elevator doors opened at the lobby level. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. I knew the moment they took him. I walked back to the chair. I picked up the piece of paper from the floor, the evidence of his crimes. I crumpled it into a ball. It was done. The debt was paid. The ledger was balanced. I walked to the kitchen and tossed the paper into the trash. Then I poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady. My heart was light. I took a sip. It tasted clean. I was Serena Williams. I was the architect. And tomorrow I had a company to run. The view from the 45th floor of the Phoenix Holdings Tower was different than the view from my old guest room window. From here, Atlanta looked like a circuit board of gold and diamonds, humming with energy that I now controlled. It had been exactly 365 days since the night I walked out of the Obsidian in a beige dress stained with red wine. A lot can happen in a year if you are the one writing the script. I turned away from the window and looked at the calendar on my desk. It was marked with a red circle. Today was the anniversary, not of my marriage. That date had been scrubbed from my memory like a stain on a silk blouse. Today was the anniversary of my rebirth. I picked up the file lying on my desk. It was the monthly report from my legal team regarding the incarceration of inmate number 74921, Jamal. He was currently residing in the Federal Correctional Institution in Jesup, Georgia. The plea deal he thought he was getting fell apart when the FBI found the second set of books he had hidden in his mother's basement. Beatrice had cracked under questioning in less than an hour, trading her son's secrets for a suspended sentence and probation. Jamal got 12 years. No parole. The report said he was working in the prison laundry. The irony was delicious. The man who used to scream if his shirts weren't starched to perfection was now washing the uniforms of other inmates for 12 cents an hour. He had lost his hair from the stress. He had lost the weight he used to maintain with personal trainers. He was just a number now. A small man in a small cell, living a small life. I closed the file. I didn't feel joy when I thought of him. I felt indifference. He was a bad investment I had written off. A sunk cost. I grabbed my purse. It was a Birkin, not because I needed the status, but because I liked the leather. I had an appointment. I took the private elevator down to the lobby. My driver Arthur was waiting. "Good morning, Ms. Williams," Arthur said, opening the door. "Where to?" "Take me to the fresh market on Peachtree, Arthur. I need to pick up something." Arthur looked surprised, but he nodded. He knew better than to question the architect. We pulled up to the grocery store 20 minutes later. It was a high-end market, the kind where apples cost $3 and the cheese had its own passport. I walked inside. The air conditioning was cold. I walked through the aisles not looking for food. I was looking for a specific checkout lane. I found it. Lane 4. The woman behind the register looked tired. Her blonde hair was showing dark roots. Her nails, once manicured to perfection, were short and unpolished. She was wearing a green apron that was slightly too big for her. It was Tiffany. Marcus had divorced her and taken everything. He had sued her for the money she stole and won. She had been forced to sell her jewelry, her clothes, her car. Her mother had taken her in for a month before kicking her out, tired of the drama. Now Tiffany lived in a studio apartment above a garage and scanned groceries to pay the rent. I stood in her line. I placed a single bottle of sparkling water on the belt. She didn't look up at first. She was scanning items mechanically, her eyes dull. "That will be $3.50, she droned. I handed her a $20 bill. "Keep the change, Tiffany," I said. Her head snapped up. Her eyes met mine. For a moment I saw the old Tiffany, the one who sneered at my beige dress. But then reality crashed in. She saw the custom suit I was wearing. She saw the peace in my face. And she saw her own reflection in my sunglasses. "Serena," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "Hello, Tiffany," I said. "You look busy." She looked around nervously, terrified that her manager would see her talking to a customer. "Please," she hissed. "Please don't make a scene. I need this job. I smiled. It was a gentle smile, the kind you give to a stranger you pity. I am not here to make a scene, I said. I just wanted to see if the rumors were true. What rumors, she asked, her hands trembling as she bagged the water. That you finally learned the value of hard work, I said. She shoved the water at me. Just go, Serena. Please, just go. I took the water. I leaned in close. The bread is on aisle 3, I whispered. Try the sourdough. It is amazing. I walked away. I didn't look back. I felt the weight of her stare on my back burning with envy and regret. But it didn't burn me. I was fireproof. Arthur drove me to my next stop. It was a building in Buckhead. Until 3 months ago, it had been known as the Obsidian, the restaurant where Jamal had tried to destroy me. I had bought it. I didn't just buy the business. I bought the building. I bought the land. I bought the debt. The previous owner was happy to sell after a sudden and mysterious drop in health inspection ratings that might have been influenced by a tip from a concerned citizen. I stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the new sign. It was sleek silver and modern. The Phoenix. I walked inside. The crystal chandeliers were gone, replaced by modern art installations. The beige walls were gone, painted a deep, rich indigo. The stuffy atmosphere was gone, replaced by a vibrant energy. The manager, a young woman named Elena, hurried over to greet me. Ms. Williams, she said, everything is ready for tonight. The chef has prepared the tasting menu exactly as you requested, and we have reserved the center table. The center table. The same spot where I had sat 10 years ago. But this time the table wasn't round. It was square. It had sharp edges. Thank you, Elena, I said. Make sure the wine list is updated. I want the 2015 Bordeaux front and center. Of course, Ms. Williams. I walked through the empty dining room. I stopped at the table. I ran my hand over the tablecloth. It was black silk. No more white, no more stains. I felt a presence behind me. I turned around. Mr. Sterling was standing there, leaning on his cane, smiling. You did it, he said. You really did it. We did it, I corrected. Phoenix Holdings posted record profits this quarter. The merger is a success. Sterling nodded, walking over to the bar. He poured 2 glasses of the Bordeaux. He handed one to me. You know, he said, watching the wine swirl in the glass. People are still talking. They say you are ruthless. They say you are cold. Let them talk, I said, taking a sip. Warmth is for people who have nothing to protect. I have an empire. Sterling chuckled. That you do. And speaking of empire building, he gestured toward the door. A man walked in. He was tall, with shoulders that filled out his navy suit. He had dark skin and a beard that was neatly trimmed. He wasn't wearing a tie. He looked relaxed, comfortable in his own skin. He didn't look like a banker. He didn't look like a shark. He looked like a man who built things with his hands. This is David, Sterling said. He runs the philanthropic arm of the foundation. He builds schools in places people have forgotten. He is the one who suggested we fund the art program for at-risk youth in Atlanta. David walked over to us. He extended a hand. His grip was firm, warm, and dry. Ms. Williams, he said. His voice was deep, a baritone that vibrated in my chest. It is an honor. Mr. Sterling has told me incredible things about your mind. My mind, I repeated, smiling. Not my dress, not my car. My mind. He says you see the world differently, David said. He says you see the architecture of things. I admire that. I am just a builder. I need someone to show me where the walls should go. I looked at him. I looked for the arrogance I was so used to. I looked for the insecurity. I found neither. I saw curiosity. I saw respect. And I saw a spark. Would you like to join us for dinner, David? I asked. I would love to, he said. But only if you let me order. I hear the owner of this place has excellent taste in wine. We sat down. Sterling took the head of the table. David sat to my right. The waiter poured the wine. The food arrived. It was exquisite. We talked. We didn't talk about money. We didn't talk about status. We talked about ideas. We talked about art. We talked about the future. David listened when I spoke. He didn't interrupt. He didn't check his phone. He looked at me as if I was the only person in the room. Halfway through the meal, I looked around the restaurant. It was full. People were laughing, eating, living. No one was looking at me with pity. No one was whispering. They were looking at me with admiration. I thought about Jamal sitting in his cell eating off a plastic tray. I thought about Tiffany scanning cans of soup. I thought about Beatrice alone in her house waiting for a call that would never come. I felt a profound sense of closure. The scales were balanced. The debt was paid. I raised my glass. David stopped talking. Sterling looked at me. "I would like to propose a toast," I said. The room didn't go silent this time. I didn't need it to. I didn't need an audience. I only needed the people at my table. To what? David asked, smiling. To the past, I said, looking at the red wine dark as blood. For teaching me what I don't want. I looked at Sterling. To the present, for giving me the power to change it. And then I looked at David. I looked at the future sitting right next to me. And to the architects I said, "May we always build better than what we destroyed." We clinked glasses. The sound was a clear bell tone ringing through the restaurant. I took a sip of the wine. It was rich, complex, and perfect. I turned to the camera. Not a real camera, but the lens of history, the gaze of everyone who had ever doubted me. I looked past David, past the restaurant, out the window at the city of Atlanta shining below us. I smiled. It wasn't a cold smile anymore. It was radiant. It was the smile of a woman who had walked through fire and come out made of gold. Success is not just about winning, I thought. It is about defining the game, and the game was mine. I put down the glass. I turned back to David. So I said, "Tell me about these schools you are building. I have some ideas about the foundations." The conversation continued into the night. The laughter was real. The joy was real. And for the first time in a year, the beige dress didn't exist. The minivan didn't exist. Only Serena existed. And she was amazing. This story reminds us that silence is never synonymous with weakness. While Jamal mistook Serena's quiet demeanor for submission, she was strategically building an empire in the shadows. The greatest power lies not in shouting the loudest, but in knowing your worth when others refuse to see it. Serena didn't just survive betrayal. She leveraged it to fuel her ascent, proving that dignity and intelligence are sharper weapons than rage. Ultimately, true success isn't about destroying your enemies, but about outgrowing them entirely. Never let anyone treat you like an option when you hold the power to own the game. Have you ever had to silence a doubter with your own success? Share your story in the comments below, and subscribe for more tales of resilience and triumph.